Otaku in the Marvel DC universe. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 176 Underrated Ancient Fruit Wine. Liang Yue. King Thranduil has arrived with the elven army and is currently stationed in the nearby town. Gandalf is here as well. He says that he needs the half bottle of wine that was previously stored with you, so he would like to invite you over. Just as Liang Yue was leading the 5 women from the base world through the treasure vault via video screen, somewhat lingering and reluctant to leave the little hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, once again descended the spiral staircase and called out to him from afar. Got it. Liang Yue responded immediately upon hearing this, and then headed towards the war room now that Thranduil had arrived, and since he had previously acted as an intermediary between Thorin and the king of the woodland realm, promising to return the Arkenstone. He should go over there now. Moreover, regardless of whether Thorin would personally return the Arkenstone, he had to go. As for Gandalf, the old wizard specifically asked for the half bottle of ancient fruit wine, which meant his condition was somewhat bad and he urgently needed nourishment at the same time. This also reflected the extraordinary nature of this top-tier brew from the Stardew Valley world. Nourishing, purifying, detoxifying. If I remember correctly, this seems to be the evaluation Gandalf gave after drinking this ancient fruit wine. However, when I drank it before, why didn't I find anything special about it? I just thought it was a kind of wine with a very good taste and a better texture. Could it be that there really is something I haven't tasted? Thinking of this, Liang Yue couldn't help but tell the people on the other side of the video about his doubts. Now that the base world is the production place of ancient fruit wine, Teacher Shizuka and the others have naturally tasted it. Seeing this, Liang Yue didn't say any unnecessary nonsense. He directly swiped his hand across the table in front of him, and the half bottle of wine immediately appeared on the table along with it. Liang Yue also sent him a tall stemmed glass. Seeing the wine, Gandalf didn't say a word, directly but opened the bottle stopper, poured himself a small half cup, and then sipped it little by little with his dry lips. Just as the first sip of wine went down, the old wizard's face immediately showed a look of intoxication, and his tightly frowned brows gradually smoothed out. His originally sallow face also began to have color, and he kept making comfortable sighs in his mouth. That appearance was just like an old-fashioned drug addict after finishing a line of cocaine. Speaking of which, is this wine really that magical? Seeing this, Liang Yue couldn't help but ask curiously. And unashamedly nourishes the body, eliminates toxins, and most importantly, it can help me purify the black magic and curse power remaining on my body. I was seriously injured when I fought Sauron and Dol Guldur. Luckily the Elven Queen, Lord Elrond, and Saruman arrived in time. This wine is perfect for me now. Gandalf was now sitting in the chair with a completely comfortable look, holding the tall glass in his hand and popularizing science for everyone, completely unaware that wealth should not be exposed. Purify black magic and the curse power in the body. Thorin's eyes lit up immediately after hearing this, and then he took the half bottle of wine without any politeness, and then took a few silver wine glasses from the side and poured himself a cup. Legolas, who was beside him, also took the wine with a surprised expression and poured himself a cup. Then, the two smiled and clinked glasses, and began to taste it with relish. Following that, the white-bearded dwarves would naturally not be polite to Gandalf, directly holding the bottle and quickly walking out of the room with a stack of wine glasses. Hey, the old wizard must have been regretting it at this time. An old, withered hand trembled twice at the dwarf's sneaky departing backs, and finally helplessly put it down. Seeing this, Liang Yue shook his head with a smile, and then gently brushed over the table again. 3 bottles of ancient fruit wine were immediately placed side by side in front of Gandalf. This is the wine I promised to give you before. Keep it safe. Oh. Thank you, Liang Yue. I thought you had forgotten. You really helped a lot. Your wine is indeed a good thing, and it is very rare. When I see Queen Galadriel later, I can give her a bottle as a gift, and then I, Saruman, and Radagast can drink a bottle together. The remaining bottle will be my collection. After carefully putting the wine on the table into his grey pouch, Gandalf's face finally lost the pain it had before. He shook his pipe, added some tobacco to it, and then began to sip the wine and smoke leisurely. Looking at the old wizard's stingy appearance, Liang Yue also felt something at this time. and then directly said to teacher Shizuka and the others on the other side of the video later, "Let's plant more ancient fruit trees at home. Thorin, your cousin Dain has arrived, leading our dwarven Ironfoot army." After only a cup of wine, the black-braided dwarf ran in excitedly from outside the door and shouted loudly, listening to the neat footsteps that were faintly coming from the air. Thorin's eyes lit up, and then he ordered the dwarves open the gates of Durin. "Now, we will go out to welcome the dwarven army." After speaking, Thorin turned his head and nodded to Liang Yue, turned back and picked up the jewelry box containing the Arkenstone from the table, and then straightened his back and walked out without looking back. Liang Yue, Legolas, Arwen, and Gandalf followed closely behind, crack crack crack, accompanied by a burst of stiff friction. The long, sealed gates of the Dwarven King's city finally slowly opened at this time under the dust. Thorin led a group of dwarves out of the gate first. A fat dwarf bomber stood on top of the gate tower, took a deep breath, and blew the horn on the city head in the blink of an eye. Liang Yue had already put on his full set of armor and stood side by side with Arwen and Gandalf. Legolas had already ridden his horse to the nearby town of Dale. Thranduil was leading the army of the Woodland Realm and stationed in that abandoned town under the double joy of reunion and recovering the capital of the homeland. The dwarves seemed very excited at this time. Thorin and his cousin Dain Ironfoot embraced each other intimately. The Ironfoot army behind them suddenly erupted with loud cheers. After a while, in another direction, Thranduil also rode his great stag and slowly came this way, accompanied by Legolas. Liang Yue, Arwen, and Gandalf took the initiative to step forward at this time, and together with Thorin and others, completed this reunion with the king of the woodland elves. Soon, under everyone's testimony, Thorin, on behalf of the dwarves, handed the jewelry box containing the Arkenstone to Thranduil. The lid of the box opened, and looking at the gem that was shining brightly in the sunlight, King Thranduil's eyes suddenly flashed with tenderness and sadness. He couldn't wake up from the memories for a long time. Screech! At this moment, a cry of an eagle suddenly resounded through the earth in the distant sky. Everyone couldn't help but turn their heads to look, only to see a divine giant eagle flying quickly from behind a mountain opposite the lonely mountain, spreading its wings. That was Liang Yue's current villager, the little female eagle Rachel. With the convenience of the language proficiency skill, Liang Yue understood its meaning almost a moment the cry sounded. Immediately, this guy curved the corners of his mouth, and a trace of excitement flashed in his eyes. Gandalf, on the other hand, for some reason, obviously understood the language of the giant eagles at this time. He sighed, subconsciously touched his glamdring sword on his waist, and then said to the people around him with a solemn expression, "The war is about to begin. The army of orcs is on the other side of the mountain. They have now been reduced to Sauron's pawns, so this invasion of the dark forces will inevitably be even more powerful." Chapter 177, Dragon-Slaying Sword. Due to Liang Yue's intervention, intentionally or unintentionally influencing the original plot, the war between the dwarves and the elves did not occur at the foot of the lonely mountain dwarf kingdom. Moreover, not only did it not happen, but even the original conflicts between the two races were resolved by Liang Yue. Therefore, the orc army is no longer waiting for the infighting between the two races to begin, causing significant casualties, before using the earthworm's ability to dig holes and emerge from the opposite side of the mountain, as in the original storyline. In addition, Rachel, the giant eagle's departure from the flock to become a villager of Liang Yue, is also a significant variable. Essentially no longer belonging to the giant eagle clan, she can more conveniently soar around Liang Yue and others, completing high-altitude reconnaissance missions for everyone. Therefore, without the room for surprise attacks and scheming, the orcs can only honestly deploy their army to the smog wasteland at the foot of the lonely mountain in the form of a group army accompanied by neat footsteps. The entire lonely mountain began to feel like a storm was brewing. Everything was silent, with no sounds of life, nor wind or rain. The earth was faintly trembling under the marching of tens of thousands of troops. Soon, a dark mass of orc armies wearing inferior armor and wielding bladed weapons arrived in the wasteland between the two cities, marching in neat steps unlike the original. To minimize casualties, the dwarves and elves, who were prepared, had already retreated to the lonely mountain and the nearby river. In advance, standing on the city walls, they held knives, arrows, and shields, all on high alert similar to the original, to clearly see the situation on the battlefield and command the army. Azog, the leader of the orcs, had climbed to Raven Hill opposite the two cities. It was a sudden, solitary mountain ridge, and people had gathered at the top of this mountain. So there were still some dilapidated buildings left. The three locations were far apart, facing each other, forming a strategic triangle. Looking down from the sky, It was like three flag bearers using the smog wasteland in the middle as a chessboard, and a battle of offense and defense between races was about to begin in this wasteland. Of course, these so-called chessboards, tactics, command posts, and so on, had little to do with Liang Yue. The only purpose of this guy's intervention in this war at this time was that is, to kill as many individual orcs as possible, and to kill as many enemy elite leaders appearing on the battlefield as possible. Apart from this, he could ignore everything else. However, Liang Yue was, after all, a powerful individual combat force belonging to the side of justice. If he could provide some convenience for the allied forces of dwarves and elves without violating his combat goals, then Liang Yue would naturally not refuse to help if he could. For example, now at this time, Liang Yue was sitting on a protruding square stone on the side of the battlefield, watching the orc army slowly advance not far away because he had worn the One Ring in advance. Liang Yue was currently in a state of invisibility, so the orcs could not detect his existence. What he had to do at this time was very simple, that was, before the war officially started, to reduce the orcs' long-range combat as much as possible, as well as the combat units that operated various siege weapons to better adapt to the combat mode on the battlefield. Liang Yue synthesized a batch of long and thick two-handed weapons in his 49 grid toolbox during the time he was waiting for the orc army to enter. For example, the greatsword that Liang Yue was carrying on his shoulder at this time, its blade was more than 3 meters long and 20 to 30 centimeters wide. The thickest part in the middle of the double-edged blade even reached 6 or 7 centimeters. The whole body was silver and bright, and it was made of all-metal integration. Liang Yue called this unconventional sword the Dragon Slayer Greatsword. In terms of weight alone, it weighed more than 200 pounds. The purpose was to allow his powerful physical fitness to bloom more brilliantly on this battlefield. Now, it's time looking at the three large formations of orc archers slowly passing by in front of him, as well as those war orcs guarding them, which were 3 or 4 times larger than ordinary orcs. Liang Yue suddenly curved the corners of his mouth and jumped lightly from the stone pier. The giant sword in his hand moved forward casually, and the whistling sound was immediately stirred up in the air. The orc army not far away immediately noticed the abnormality here and looked in his direction, but at this time, these were no longer important. At this moment, Liang Yue tightly grasped the long hilt of the sword with both hands. With a light tap of his feet, the whole person instantly turned into a gray shadow. When he reappeared, he had already rushed more than 10 meters away. Then, he took another step. When he reappeared, he had instantly smashed into the orc army. At the edge of the archer formation on the side of the orc army formation, where people were almost squeezing people, a dozen orcs wearing crude iron armor were instantly divided into 2 and fell to the ground. It was not until after falling down that they recovered from this change, and then screamed out. This sudden change immediately caused the originally neat army formation behind to stagnate. A group of nearby orcs were directly frightened and shivered. They subconsciously stopped moving forward. However, before they could make further response changes, swish, another short, sharp whistling sound flashed past in the eyes of the surrounding orcs. It seemed that an invisible blade had slashed past them, and all the fellow soldiers within a radius of 4 or 5 meters were instantly divided into 2 again. Like weeds, they were harvested by the scythe of the god of death, leaving only their disparate and confused wails before their death. The unknown fear is the real fear, and the invisible enemy is the most chilling enemy. Liang Yue was wearing the One Ring at this moment, wielding the greatsword in his hand, and had already turned into a nightmare for this orc army invisibly. After experiencing the initial tentative attack, this guy finally began to reveal his hideous fangs and started the full combat mode. Swish, another horizontal slash was struck out like a half moon. Wherever the blade passed, all the targets within his 4 or 5 meter fan-shaped attack circle were swept away. Stinky blood sprayed wantonly, leaving a pile of amputated and wailing orcs, helplessly asking their surrounding teammates for help. But their encounters caused the surrounding friendly forces to retreat one after another, unconsciously making bursts of terrified low roars. However, Liang Yue did not have time to care about their thoughts. This guy at this time seemed to have turned into a cold butcher, gradually finding a rhythm suitable for his own attack. After a horizontal slash, Liang Yue did not stop at all, and did not even wait for the orcs who were cut in half to fall to the ground. He stepped on his feet and jumped forward a little, stepping on the edge of the previous attack range. He waved the Dragon Slayer greatsword again towards the enemy in front. After sweeping across, he jumped again, and then slashed, then jumped, then slashed, then jumped, so repeatedly. In just a few tens of seconds, Liang Yue had directly pierced the entire orc army from one side to the other. A large number of orc archers were directly cut in half by his monotonous horizontal/offensive, but this guy was not satisfied at all at this moment. After passing through the army, he turned around again and continued to rush into the army formation behind with a long sword in his hand. Looking at Liang Yue's momentum, it seemed that he wanted to kill a few more back and forth among the orcs. Chapter 178 Under the Sword, We Are All Ants. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Invisible blades of light slashed through the orcish ranks, unseen and untouchable yet. The series of short, sharp whistling sounds were truly terrifying. After another pass through the orcish formation, the time Liang Yue spent had drastically decreased, from the original tens of seconds to the current teens. Originally, his attack frequency was at most 1 or 2 sword strikes per second, but now, on his return, it had more than doubled. In the space between the soul and reality, Liang Yue was like a nimble dragonfly, each leap as light as a touch on the water's surface. However, each ripple caused by his landing brought an elusive death. Soon, after just 2 more passes, he had slain almost all of the archers in the orcish army. Those orcs who, under the scolding of their commanding officers, tentatively waved their swords at Liang Yue, trying to discern his true nature, were mercilessly slaughtered as soon as they entered his attack range. Even those war orcs known for their courage and strength, their bodies were huge and strong, enslaved and raised by the orcs from a young age, some even having their limbs cut off and replaced with large foot hammers and hand scythes. But even such war machines, when faced with Liang Yue's invisible and unreasonable sweeping attacks, could not escape being cleaved in two. Therefore, when Liang Yue once again swept through the orcish ranks, annihilating all the orcs responsible for siege warfare with catapults, a strange sense of panic began to appear in the orcish army. If it weren't for the suppression of several corps commanders and ruthless executioners, this army would probably have already shown signs of collapse. Asog, the orcish leader standing high on Raven's Ridge, was equally helpless against the enemy who was currently stabbing his army in the back after repeatedly sweeping through a batch of orcs. Liang Yue had also faintly noticed signs of instability in the enemy's morale. Faced with this situation, he saw it in his eyes and worried in his heart. I can't let them collapse like this. Where am I going to continue farming monsters if the team really collapses? Chasing and killing is not as enjoyable as this mowing mode on the battlefield. No, I have to give them some hope. With this thought in mind, Liang Yue immediately stopped his leaping and slashing movements, and stuck the dragon-slaying sword in his hand into the ground. Then, he directly took off the supreme magic ring from his hand, and in the next moment, his figure appeared directly in the middle of the orcish army's encirclement. Speaking of which, the orc race is still very warlike and skilled in battle. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to fight back and forth with the dwarves, elves, and humans with the strength of their own race. And the situation was once even in their favor. Faced with Liang Yue, an oddity who suddenly appeared in their army formation, the orcs' first reaction was surprise, but then they all went berserk. Roar. Ah. Ooh-ah. For a time, all kinds of roars and howls began to resound throughout the battlefield. The orcish army, which had been frightened and on the verge of collapse, suddenly burst out with a huge contrast in killing intent as long as the enemy could be seen, especially such a figure who, in their opinion, was not particularly outstanding in size and stature. Faced with Liang Yue, an enemy who had wantonly slaughtered thousands of their teammates and dared to show himself in front of them, the orcs immediately clenched their weapons and bared their buck teeth. Without even the order of the officers in the army formation, they rushed towards Liang Yue in the encirclement. They roared and howled, and for a time, they burst out with an unusually high fighting spirit. Some waved the weapons in their hands, slashing at him from afar, while others threw the spears in their hands directly as javelins, impatiently throwing them at him. Some didn't even plan to save their lives, and when they approached Liang Yue, they directly pounced on him, leaping into the air with all their might, baring their fangs and claws as they pounced at him. However, what these brave orcs didn't know was that this was exactly what Liang Yue had been hoping for in his heart. Whoosh! Faced with the enemies rushing from all directions, this guy curled his lips, and with a light stomp of his feet, his entire person disappeared in place. In an instant when he reappeared, he had already taken the initiative to meet the enemies in one direction. The blade swept across, the fan-shaped sword light flashed and disappeared in front of him, reflecting a dazzling cold light in the sunlight wherever it passed. All the orcs within a radius of 4 or 5 meters in front of him were all cut in half at the waist with one blow. Still the same lethality, still the same efficiency in slaughter, but the difference was that Liang Yue was no longer the invisible enemy from before. Faced with such a blatant target as him, the surrounding orcs no longer had the panicked emotions they had before, and they fiercely mustered all their strength. rushing towards him without regard for life or death. However, even exposed to the sunlight, Liang Yue was still incredibly brave and unstoppable. Wherever the dragon-slaying greatsword passed, any enemy would be shattered with a single blow. This real person, these real flashes of swords, and the enemies who were subsequently cut in half at the waist and beheaded, instead presented his figure in an even more shocking way before the people, in the distance. On the high Raven Hill, Azag watched the figure below, like a flea, constantly jumping around in his army, waving a giant sword, and reaping the lives of his people unconsciously. He bared his fangs. Dragon Slayer, Liang Yue, he roared in a low voice. This name that had been widely circulated with the ravens in recent days. Slowly, a few doubts arose on Azag's face, and he couldn't help but fall into a moment of contemplation. After a long while, he suddenly raised his head, and then immediately shouted to the deputy beside him, immediately send information to our master Soren. Just say that the power of the One Ring has appeared on the Lonely Mountain battlefield. The enemy is we need support, yes. At the same time, Liang Yue's ferocious performance on the battlefield naturally made the allied forces on his side cheer and roar. The white-bearded dwarf was tightly gripping the stone pier in front of him, staring at the figure rampaging on the battlefield with a shocked face, muttering to himself, "Oh, Mother Earth is above, our dragon meat-eater so ferocious." Gandalf rolled his eyes when he heard this, and then the old wizard looked at the elven princess next to him. Arwen, do you know why Liang Yue took off the One Ring before? According to my previous observations, the ring should have no effect on him. Why didn't he continue to be invisible? After all, that would make him safe for this. Maybe it's related to his purpose in coming to Middle-earth to train. Arwen replied somewhat uncertainly after hearing this, although in this woman's heart, she had already vaguely guessed Liang Yue's thoughts, but this reason was too absurd after all. Moreover, at this time, she had already become Liang Yue's villager, and in terms of identity, she could be regarded as inseparable from him. But Arwen at this time was obviously not yet accustomed to this additional relationship between them, and subconsciously, she was still avoiding contact with someone. It seems that, according to Arwen's character and her inner pride, this situation will probably have to continue for a while. If I remember correctly, Liang Yue did mention this topic before, and his purpose in coming to Middle-earth to train has always been very clear: to slay dragons and help us eliminate the dark forces. In addition, it is to try to reduce the number of orc armies as much as possible. Speaking of which, Gandalf's voice suddenly paused. He pursed his lips, looked at the figure still rampaging on the battlefield, and said somewhat helplessly, judging from the situation just now, Liang Yue in an invisible state did bring great panic to the orcs. If it had continued for a while, they might have collapsed on their own without us having to move in. After he showed up, those orcs obviously became more energetic. Liang Yue's use of the power of the One Ring on the battlefield, as again the others may have guessed the truth, would if they attract the Dark Lord Sauron over. Thorin obviously understood the old wizard's words at this time, but now that he has been promoted to the King of Dwarves, what he is worried about is another matter. Impossible. Sauron has not yet recovered to his peak, and in the previous battle, he has also been injured by the Elven Queen and driven to the east. It is now unlikely that he will come to the foot of Lonely Mountain in person. Besides, looking at Liang Yue's performance on the battlefield now, how do I feel that he is even stronger than Sauron at his peak? The greatsword swept across, invincible. At this time, Liang Yue, who was fighting fiercely, even began to unconsciously experiment with the blessing effect brought by the internal force of primordial unity skill. Rolling internal force was constantly injected into the dragon-slaying greatsword from his upper hands. Under the sunlight, a faint milky white halo was attached to the long blade. Whoosh, turn around, swing the sword, sweep, accompanied by a short, sharp whistling sound. In an instant, a wide crescent sword light suddenly shot out from the blade, like a dazzling new moon. It was initially connected to the blade, increasing the attack range of the dragon-slaying greatsword. And then it surged out directly from the blade, roar, accompanied by a crisp sword sound. All the enemies within more than 10 meters in front of Liang Yue were shattered. My goodness! A full 5,000 points of internal force, just to exchange for such a little effect? Chapter 179. Let me have a meal first. Ling. Congratulations, host, for continuously using the sweeping sword style and consecutively achieving multiple one-hit kills. During this process, you have gained insights and independently comprehended the skill sweep. Amidst the chaos and clamor, the system's prompt sounded like heavenly music in Liang Yue's mind. However, he didn't have the leisure to divert his attention to check it at this moment. Instead, he became even more ferocious, constantly moving within the chaotic ranks of the surrounding orc army, sweeping, moving, sweeping from one end of the orc army to the other, from ordinary shield and sword soldiers to mace-wielding orcs, from densely packed spear formations to warg riders. Under this mechanical hacking and slashing mode, one orc after another wailed and fell to the ground, their bodies separated in half. Heads and tails parted after a while. Once the blood had flowed out and the life force had dissipated, they turned into piles of corpses, congesting and accumulating on the once empty smog's desolation. The thick stench of blood permeated the battlefield, but it seemed to further stimulate the ferocity of the orcs, who lived up to their reputation as a fighting race. Even knowing that charging forward would ultimately lead to death, they still showed no hesitation. However, not all orc warriors were as mindless as their brethren. After realizing that their previous tactics of human waves, encirclement, and joint suppression were almost ineffective, some of the commanders who still possessed some archery skills, as well as the slightly more intelligent orcs, began to change their thinking. Some picked up bows and arrows to launch sneak attacks at Liang Yue in the encirclement, while others held up spears and javelins picked up from the ground and threw them at him from a distance. Unfortunately, the results of their actions were still almost non-existent. Most of these ranged attacks undoubtedly missed due to Liang Yue's rapid movement and serpentine dodging. Occasionally, a few arrows and javelins did hit him by chance, but the armor forged from the 49 grid toolbox that Liang Yue wore was not for show. Not only was its defense outstanding, but it also covered him from head to toe no matter which direction the ranged attack came from. When it hit his outer layer of pure iron armor, it would often rub against the diamond-shaped forged surface and refract in another direction at the first moment, and there was a high probability that it would injure their teammates. While the impact on Liang Yue, the person they were actually targeting, was almost the same as being bitten by a mosquito. Undoubtedly, a well-made armor set's role on the battlefield is unquestionable. Liang Yue had once heard a rumor in his previous life that is, the role a warrior equipped with fine full-body armor and a sharp weapon can play on the battlefield far exceeds ordinary people's imagination. On the western battlefields of the Cold Weapon era, the highest record of a single knight wearing full gear was almost single-handedly cutting down an entire wall of defending soldiers. If ordinary people were already like this, let alone Liang Yue on the battlefield of cold weapons, weapons such as knives and swords, which primarily rely on sharpness for lethality, have very limited lethality when facing warriors wearing full metal armor. Therefore, blunt weapons such as warhammers are, to some extent, the real mainstream when certain armies face off. Unfortunately, no matter what kind of weapons the orcs were holding at this time, they all seemed so powerless when facing Liang Yue under the high-frequency swinging of the dragon-slaying greatsword, which had a blade length of more than 3 meters. All enemies who tried to approach his surrounding area were undoubtedly shattered with one blow. Therefore, no one could truly get close, let alone truly walk up to Liang Yue and engage in a close-range, equal battle. Human strength has its limits. This sentence is undoubtedly the root of the contradiction, and even Liang Yue is no exception. Even after being fused with the rules of the McWorld and obtaining the abilities of the McGame character, he would not run out of strength, nor would he have to worry about insufficient stamina. However, after a high-intensity amount of exercise, Liang Yue still had to replenish food in a timely manner to maintain his energy consumption. My hunger level is almost depleted. If I keep grinding, I'm afraid it will affect my health. It seems I have to replenish it quickly. Speaking of which, from the beginning until now, I've probably been slashing for more than a quarter of an hour. Right, after grinding for about 20 minutes, I should have farmed quite a few orcs. Right, I might as well take advantage of the break to replenish food and see how the harvest is. After making up his mind, he quickly scanned his surroundings. Immediately, Liang Yue changed his original attack route. After a sword key sweep with a dragon-slaying greatsword in his hand, this guy began to advance towards the closest gap in the orc army's encirclement. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After slashing more than a dozen times in a row, a straight passage paved with orc corpses appeared before his eyes. Liang Yue immediately tapped his feet, and the whole person quickly broke away from the entanglement of the rear army. After a few twists of his figure, he came to the edge of Smog's desolation, on the hillside of a steep hill. Then, this guy stuck the greatsword in his hand into the ground with a flip of his sleeve. He used stone cubes to build a stone wall nearly 3 meters high and 3 meters wide. On the ground he leaned against the back of the wall, holding a large beef pancake in his right hand and a large glass of milk in his left hand, and began to frantically fill his mouth. That human knight is finished. Everyone, hurry up. Take the opportunity to kill him. You're the one who's finished. Listening to the howling of those orc soldiers dozens of meters away, Liang Yue immediately stuck his head out. While quickly chewing in his mouth, He also took a glance at the orc squad leader who was shouting nonsense and secretly noted the appearance of this guy. Then, with a thought, the light screen recording the task interface popped up in front of him. Unbalanced orcs. Current kill count: 7,952 horizontal/level. 210 current level. 2 The simplest and most direct move, which can cause effective damage to a group of enemies within a certain range in front. While swinging the weapon, there is a small probability of passively unleashing a sword wind, which can increase the attack range of the sweeping move. The attack power of the sword wind is equal to the attack power of the weapon sweep skill effect. Horizontal/attack power plus 15% sword wind appearance probability is 3% skill proficiency. 371,500 damn? I unknowingly leveled up horizontal/ to level 2? Even so, I didn't even unleash a single sword wind. How bad is my luck? Looking at this skill that he had newly comprehended, Liang Yue almost spat out a milk in his mouth, but he quickly composed himself anyway. Luck has always been like this. When people are unlucky, drinking water can choke you for a day, but once luck comes, every strike will be a fiery one. More than 7,000, almost 8,000 data. That is to say, in just under 20 minutes, I not only completed the baseline standard for this task, but also earned an extra 3,000 points. It seems that my previous idea of farming data on the battlefield was indeed correct. But next, I have to continue my efforts. It's rare to have such a task, so I have to earn 10,000 points no matter what. After farming here, I have to go to Mount Doom as well. It is said that's where Soren's main base is. Soon, in just a few seconds, this foodie chewed frantically, and 3 meat pancakes were swallowed into his stomach in order to make himself eat more smoothly. He even took the time to drink another glass of milk. At this moment, the orcs on the opposite side were still howling excitedly, but the fastest ones had just invaded the slope in front of him, within a range of more than 10 meters. Seeing this, the corners of Liang Yue's mouth suddenly curved, and he reached out and pulled out the dragon-slaying greatsword stuck in the mountain rock behind him. With a thought, the full coverage helmet, which only revealed a long slit, was immediately put on his head. Turning around and walking out from behind the wall, Liang Yue looked at the orc army that was swarming towards him in groups below, and unconsciously said, "I've replenished my energy, now let's continue killing." Chapter 180 Cavalry Charge. Just as Liang Yue was wielding the greatsword in his hand, once again plunging into the horde of orcs, sweeping left and right, forcibly carving out a bloody path, and frantically advancing on the other side, the dwarves, who had been standing by in the lonely mountain kingdom, were now also beginning to move under the leadership of Thorn. The resounding horn was sounding on the city walls. Liang Yue's previous mid-battle withdrawal, pausing for a tens of seconds mid-game break to eat, was likely the trigger for the dwarves' current action. However, they probably didn't expect at the time that Liang Yue had really just gone to eat a meal. Just as the dwarves had just walked down the city walls, this guy had already returned, entering the orc army formation with an even more ferocious attitude. However, since the battle horn had already been blown, the pace of war would not suddenly stop because of someone's reason. Moreover, due to Liang Yue's previous reckless actions, charging and rampaging with a dragon-slaying greatsword, the orcs' army formation had already been thrown into complete disarray, completely lacking the previous battle formation tactics. Archers and siege orcs, and other combat units, had already been slaughtered clean by this guy. The orcs had brought a total of over 20,000 troops to attack the Lonely Mountain this time. It can be said that the orcs' battle for the Lonely Mountain this time has basically been predetermined in advance, as the Defiler, located on Raven Hill, now can only pin his hopes on Soren's almost unpredictable reinforcements. Accompanied by a burst of jerky metal friction, the tall city gate of the Dwarf Kingdom slowly opened at this moment. Subsequently, Thorin, riding a sturdy goat mount, was the first to rush out from the gate. At this time, he was wearing a crown, clad in battle armor, holding a sword and shield, with a face full of fearlessness and determination. Behind him, followed a large number of well-equipped goat cavalry, led by the members of the company who had shared wheel and moor with him for many days, his 2 nephews Philly, Keely, Balin, Dwalin, the fat dwarf bomber, and others, as well as the important figure of the dwarf clan who had just led the Ironfoot Legion to come to help Thorin's cousin in Ironfoot. However, after exiting the gate, Thorin did not rashly lead the cavalry directly towards the orc army, but quickly assembled the army formation on the large open space in front of the gate. Teams of goat cavalry and Ironfoot infantry marched out of the city gate in formation. At this time they were now in high spirits, lined up in neat formations, constantly shouting loudly on the other side. The elves who were holding the city of Dale were also playing the war horns at this time. Teams of spearmen in golden armor stepped out of the city gate, followed by a large number of neat archers. King Thranduil, riding a great elk, led a team of cavalry at the forefront. The orcs were now also working hard to reorganize their battle formation, hurriedly forming rows under the urging of the army commander. Spearmen in the front, sword and shield soldiers in the back, posing a standard defensive posture, looking quite organized. That team of more than 10,000 people, standing there in formation, was equally impressive. Unfortunately, they have now encountered Liang Yue, faced with a gathering of the dwarf and elf armies. The orcs had now quietly changed their strategy, attempting to entangle Liang Yue's actions with a small number of troops, and wanting to cleverly trick him away, so as to buy space for the rest of the troops to assemble and form a battle formation. However, how could Liang Yue be so stupid? The enemy sets a trap. Does he have to jump into it? From the moment the battle horn sounded, this guy already understood that the decisive battle would definitely be next. His main purpose now, although, is to kill monsters as much as possible, farm data and earn points. But how many orcs are in front of him now, responsible for entanglement and temptation? And how many are in the army formation gathered over there? Liang Yue's eyes are not blind, facing a few strong and sturdy orcs, with solid muscles, deliberately showing off their existence in front of him, making provocative gestures to him. This guy of course first chose to satisfy them, but after slicing these few foolish baits in half with one sword, Liang Yue cleverly made a lion's head swing, turning his gaze to the other side of the orc army formation holding the dragon-slaying greatsword. After a few sweeps and dashes, he easily got rid of the entanglement of this small group of orcs, and then once again plunged into their main force. In an instant, Liang Yue seemed to hear the annoyed roar of Azog, the leader of the orcs. On Raven Hill, after a burst of swordlight and shadows, the orcs team was once again disrupted, and this time, it was the front row of the army formation that suffered. Those spearmen who had erected dense rows of spears, like a deadly thorn forest, blocking the route of the dwarf cavalry. In just over 10 seconds, this spearman line of nearly 200 meters long was once again penetrated from start to finish by Liang Yue like a gust of wind sweeping away fallen leaves, accompanied by broken limbs, severed arms, and blood, sweeping across from the side all the way. "Kill with me." Immediately afterwards, Thorin on the front battlefield roared loudly at this moment, seizing this obvious battle opportunity, urging the mount under him, and leading the 2,000 goat cavalry behind him to charge over. However, the elves' offensive arrived a step ahead of the dwarves, first descending on the heads of the orc Shui under the sunlight. A large piece of arrow rain, flashing with golden light, instantly rose from the elf archer array, neat and uniform, accompanied by a burst of complex and sharp sounds of breaking through the air. This wave of arrows drew a high parabola in the air, and then fell heavily towards the orcs' chaotic army formation. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. As the rain fell, patches of orcs were shot, fell to the ground, and wailed. The original, somewhat dense army formation collapsed at this moment, exposing a large number of sword and shield orcs in the rear. As a result, there were no more decent fortifications on the road for the charging goat cavalry. Rumble. At the initial contact between the two armies, patches of orcs were directly knocked away by the goat cavalry. Thorin was now charging at the forefront, wielding Orcrist. Perhaps Liang Yue's exaggerated battle achievements had stimulated a fighting desire deep in the heart of this dwarf king. He appeared unusually brave at this time. Wherever he passed, he was invincible, even in the midst of thousands of troops. He could calmly kill the enemy troops, and cut down the orcs blocking his path one by one. Leading the army behind him, broke into the enemy's army formation from the weak point, destroying the orcs' will to resist. And King Thranduil did not seem willing to lag behind at this time. Although the cavalry he brought this time was small, only 100 or 200 riders, but they were obviously elite soldiers. Now that Thorin was leading the team to slash and kill on the front of the battlefield, he simply led his elf guards to break in from the side, forming a pincer attack with the dwarves' goat cavalry, and continuing to cruelly ravage the remaining orcs. Liang Yue was very envious of what he saw on the side at this time. Although it was pleasant for him to fight against the entire army formation alone with a single sword, the current group army confrontation mode was also full of charm, which couldn't help but make him yearn for it. However, just as Liang Yue at this moment wanted to carry the dragon-slaying greatsword and rush into the enemy formation again to farm a wave of data, a sudden shadow in the distant sky, however, immediately caught his attention. Rumble, accompanied by a loud thunder. The sky, which was originally sunny, was now rapidly darkening on the eastern horizon. Streaks of lightning were constantly brewing in the dark clouds. In just a moment, that large cloud had spread from the end of the sky. Occupying most of the sky and below this cloud, a large number of bats with wingspans exceeding 1 meter were constantly circling back and forth, making unpleasant roars in their mouths. Chapter 181 9 Ring Wraiths plus 9 Dragons. Soren's reinforcements? Speaking of which, these kinds of bats did appear in the original story, but they were later torn apart by the giant eagles who came to help just as Liang Yue was slightly distracted. These bats, which were constantly circling in the air, joined the battle in the army formation below at the urging of a beastly roar. One by one, the black bats flapped their wings, harassing the dwarf cavalry, preventing them from concentrating on the battle as they had before. After a moment, cries of agony erupted from the ranks of the dwarves. Liang Yue focused his eyes and saw that the faces of the attacked dwarves were covered in scratches. Some unlucky ones even had their eyes gouged out. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the orcs organized a line of resistance and began to fight back against the cavalry, who had lost their momentum. Seeing this, Liang Yue stopped wasting words. With a flip of his wrist, an assault rifle was already in his hand. However, just as he was about to start sniping the bats from afar, he suddenly heard Gandalf's shout in his ear, Liang Yue, don't worry about those bats. You have more important opponents now." Liang Yue turned his head at the sound, only to see the old wizard running towards him with long strides, a sword in one hand and a staff in the other, his expression full of anxiety. Following the direction he indicated, Liang Yue looked towards the edge of the eastern horizon. There, several separate black dots were flying towards the lonely mountain. A chilling aura seemed to be permeating the air. In just a few breaths, they became larger and larger in people's sight, and the gradually revealed outlines caused the dwarves and elves' offensive to stagnate. Thorin, seeing that the situation was not good, immediately shouted the retreat order. Quickly leading the remaining goat riders back, Queen Thranduil on the flank retreated even faster than the dwarves. After a skillful turn of the horse, she led her cavalry back to the front of the elven phalanx. Then, a group of ignorant bat-like creatures thought they had scared off the enemy, and then launched a pursuit. However, just as Gandalf had said before, those bats that seemed arrogant and rampaged in the sky above the battlefield were not worth worrying about at all. After only one round of arrow rain from the elves, more than half of them were shot down. The rest screamed and flew towards the rear of the orcs. What are those? Dragon riders. Looking at the flying units getting closer and closer in the sky above, Liang Yue's face suddenly became serious, and a strong sense of excitement grew in his eyes. Gandalf, who had arrived beside him, took a deep breath and looked at those figures seemingly bathed in darkness with a solemn expression. Then, he explained to himself in a cadence. Soren once used tricks to obtain the craftsmanship of the elves, and used it to create some rings of amazing power. He gave 3 of them to the elves under the sky, 7 were given to the dwarves living in stone caves, and 9 were given to the human monarchs who were destined to die. The 9 undead riding on dragons in front of you, they were once the kings of the 9 human kingdoms, and they all had remarkable achievements in their lives, but after death, they were controlled by Sauron and eventually became slaves of the 9 rings. The 9 ring wraiths, I've heard about them for a long time. After listening to the old wizard's words, Liang Yue no longer hesitated, reached out and pulled out the dragon slayer greatsword from the ground, and then slowly walked towards the gradually cleared battlefield. Liang Yue, they must be here for the 1 ring, be careful, huh? According to this little old man, he doesn't seem to be planning to fight side by side with me. Arriving at the center of the battlefield, Liang Yue looked up at the ring wraiths in the sky above. Then, he aimed at the 9 dragons flapping their wings beneath them. Immediately, this guy couldn't help but feel ecstatic in his heart. 9 ring wraiths, that must be considered elite leader monsters? Plus their dragon mounts, that's 18 at this time. The dragons being ridden by the ring wraiths in gorgeous black armor were naturally not comparable to the previous evil dragon Smog. Judging from the size alone, Smog was 140 to 150 meters tall, while these guys were only 13 to 14 meters long. At a glance, you can tell they are sons of the breed. In addition, looking at the slender scales of these little dragons, Liang Yue felt that they were similar to fish scales, and some parts had been severely damaged and decayed. Thinking about their current origin, as mounts for the ring wraiths, special undead creatures, it is very likely that these dragons are also undead creatures transformed by undead rituals. And Gandalf also said that Smog was the last dragon in Middle-earth. This undoubtedly also shows from the side that these dragon knight mounts are not living things, not alive, but not difficult to deal with. Looking at the 9 black armored ring wraiths hovering in the air in front of him, flying high there in a condescending posture, Liang Yue knew that aerial combat would definitely be unfavorable to him. Not to mention that the giant eagle Rachel had mysteriously disappeared again. Even if the little female eagle was here now, because he can't fly himself, aerial combat is definitely his weakness. Therefore, In order to reverse this very unfriendly battlefield situation, Liang Yue decided to lure them down first. The 9 ring wraiths were very cautious at this time, and the dragons under them carried them to fly more than 100 meters above the ground, almost shoulder to shoulder with the clouds above their heads at this height. Even the elven archer squads could not do anything about them, however. Liang Yue had noticed before that the dwarves in the lonely mountain city were pushing dusty bed crossbows and carrying long steel crossbow bolts, rushing out of the city gates, so unless necessary, those ring wraiths would definitely not easily swoop down and take risks. However, Liang Yue knew clearly at this moment their weaknesses and what they desired in their hearts, so, under the attention of the 2 armies in front and behind, holding their breaths and concentrating, this guy suddenly raised his left hand, and then gently pinched it with his thumb and index finger. The next moment, the golden one ring immediately appeared between his 2 fingers. Liang Yue then grinned at the ring wraiths in the sky above, showing a friendly smile, and then shook the one ring in his hand. Whoosh! In an instant, a gust of wind suddenly blew across the entire world. The heavy atmosphere in the field, like the eve of a storm, was finally broken for a time. A chaotic and unclear whisper suddenly sounded on the vast battlefield, accompanied by the blowing of the wind, as if possessing some kind of magic, making people upset and uneasy. That scene was like 9 old women lying next to your ears, murmuring, forcibly instilling all kinds of emotions such as scolding, persuasion, scolding, laughter, temptation into everyone's ears, and you can't help but listen. Liang Yue can almost ignore this kind of mental attack and doesn't care at all, but the dwarves and elves behind him can't. However, at this time, he didn't have time to look back. After putting away the one ring, he kept staring at the 9 ring wraiths in the sky above. Immediately afterwards, accompanied by a sharp howl that seemed to tear the eardrums, the orcs on the opposite battlefield began to charge. Leading the way at the front was actually the pale orc Azog, whom Liang Yue had met once. At the same time, the 9 ring wraiths above the orcs also urged the dragon knight mounts under them, drawing a smooth arc in the air and swooping down rapidly in the blink of an eye. They had surpassed the orc vanguard below. Their flying skills seemed exceptionally skilled. After rapidly descending to a height of more than 10 meters above the ground, they changed direction and maintained a flying perspective parallel to the ground. Wrapped in the gale, they roared and pounced towards Liang Yue from all angles in front of his line of sight. Seeing this, the excitement in Liang Yue's eyes grew even stronger. After quickly scanning the 9 targets, he slowly raised his left hand. The posture was as if he was holding something. System, this time I want 10,000. Chapter 182, Chopping Melons and Vegetables. This time, I want 10,000. As Liang Yue's voice fell, a cluster of radiant light instantly rose from his palm, as if substantial, yet without any weight, its entirety presenting a pale yellow color. This radiance didn't seem dazzling, but when it shone on the body, it gave a person a refreshing and warm feeling at the same time. The beams of light it emitted also possessed exceptional penetrating power, almost instantly illuminating the entire battlefield. Originally somewhat gloomy under the thick blanket of dark clouds, the desolation of smog was instantly covered in a layer of glorious light, as if a sun had risen. Almost at the instant Liang Yue raised this ball of light, the 9 ring wraiths who were originally flying towards him on their dragons screamed miserably as if enduring immense pain. They involuntarily covered their eyes. The black smoke surrounding them began to constantly dissolve and dissipate under the illumination of this light. The dragon steeds beneath them took the same action as the ring wraiths. Ignoring their original rapid flight, they directly used their outstretched wings to shield their eyes. From their ferocious dragon mouths came miserable howls, their reactions under the radiance even more unbearable than their masters. Thus, after losing the balance of their wings, the dragons and ring wraiths originally flying in mid-air directly crashed to the ground, turning into piles of rolling gourds. Puff puff puff. Relying on the inertia generated from their previous rapid dive, they continued to tumble forward, finally barely stopping 7 or 8 meters in front of a certain someone. Oh. Seeing this, Liang Yue, while surprised by the restraint of solar energy on these undead creatures, naturally wouldn't be polite with them. He tossed the 10,000 portions of stacked solar energy into the air, and then, wielding the dragon-slaying greatsword, he grinned and pounced forward. When he reappeared, this fellow had already arrived in front of the dragon closest to him, the greatsword in his hand raised high, and then he swept it down. A semi-transparent blade of energy flashed and disappeared in front of him like a crescent moon. Following the powerful sweep, the original 4 to 5 meter attack range of the dragon-slaying greatsword instantly doubled. Clang! Accompanied by a burst of rough metallic friction, sparks flew from the chest of the ring wraith on the dragon's back, a deep mark cut by the sword wind. Why is there so little effect? Did they say that the attack power of sword wind is the same as the sweeping attack power of the weapon? Besides, with my strength, just as Liang Yue was puzzled by this and somewhat wide-eyed, the voice of the old wizard Gandalf drifted over from behind again. Liang Yue, use enchanted weapons to deal with the ring wraiths I see. Hearing his words, this fellow suddenly understood, and with a flip of his sleeve, the dragon-slaying greatsword he had been gripping was instantly replaced by two standard longswords that he was accustomed to using at this moment. A red and a gray halo were tightly surrounding the sword blades. The red halo represented fire enchantment, while the gray one was the external manifestation of the undead slayer enchantment. Swish! With the enchanted dual swords unleashed, the X-shaped sword light was as fast as lightning, and the ring wraith in front of him was instantly shattered on the spot. A head, still wearing its helmet and connected to the neck, flew into the sky, then, accompanied by a hoarse and desperate wail, with the added effect of spatial surround sound. The ring wraith, originally appearing solid, suddenly disintegrated into a pile of semi-transparent sand, and under the illumination of the solar energy, it finally turned into a cloud of smoke and scattered away. However, Liang Yue ignored this, and with a tap of his foot, he disappeared from the spot. With a slight frown when he reappeared, he was already beside another ring wraith nearby. This brother in front of him was also relatively unlucky, his entire body pinned to the ground by his dragon steed, leaving only his head exposed. Even his hands couldn't be pulled out, and under the irradiation of solar energy, his distorted and blurred face let out a continuous stream of painful wails. Liang Yue would naturally not be polite with it at this time, and with a longsword enchanted with fire enchantment in his hand, he stabbed it fiercely into the ring wraith's face, accompanied by a violent reaction like water being boiled in a pot of oil, mixed with sparks flying everywhere. The ring wraith's face was finally pierced through by his strike, but the process seemed somewhat stiff. Whoosh! The longsword was swung again forcefully, but this time the target was changed to the dragon steed, pressing on it accompanied by a violent force of flame. The blade slashed across the lower part of the dragon's head. Afterward, Liang Yue's figure flashed again, and he arrived beside another ring wraith. A gray longsword flashed, slicing towards the opponent's neck. The whole process was as smooth as silk, encountering almost no resistance. As expected, a longsword enchanted with flame enhancement isn't as effective as Undead Slayer when killing undead monsters. This is especially true for higher-level creatures. It's fine against a dragon that's been converted into an undead, but the difference is quite significant when used against the ring wraiths. But that's also true. Flame enhancement is pretty much a versatile attribute that's useful against everyone, while Undead Slayer only works against undead creatures. Thinking this, Liang Yue's eyes darted around. With a flip of his sleeve, the longsword that was originally surrounded by a reddish glow instantly transformed into an ordinary-looking single-handed straight sword. This sword was single-edged and had a handguard on the hilt. It seemed unremarkable, but it was actually the beloved possession of a powerful figure. Swish! With a single sword strike, another dragon head went flying high into the air. Immediately after, Liang Yue's figure flashed again, instantly arriving beside the fourth ring wraith. With a clean and swift sweep, a hideous head, along with both arms, flew into the sky. Bathed in the sunlight, they instantly turned into a cloud of smoke and dissipated into nothingness. Following this, Liang Yue spun around, and with a flash of his sword, the mount dragon beside him was also decapitated. The sword with Mami's aura is worthy of being the Vampire King's son's sword. Although its attack power is a bit low, it can hit anything, be it ghosts, skeletons, zombies, or creatures with various attributes. It can hit anyone, and it can make anyone bleed. In terms of effectiveness, it's actually much stronger than a longsword enchanted with flame enhancement, and so, in the time that followed, Liang Yue, the scoundrel, switched rapidly between the 9 ring wraiths, using one hand for Undead Slayer and the other for the Mami sword. Despairing and ethereal wails echoed continuously on the battlefield. Although it sounds a bit complicated, the entire process, from start to finish, only took a few breaths. After he had slain the last of the defenseless ring wraiths, the orcs, who were still persisting in charging towards Liang Yue under the illumination of the sunlight's energy, had only just approached his front. Among them, the fastest runner was naturally the leader of the orcs, the Pale Isaac, but perhaps the successive and miserable deaths of the 9 ring wraiths had caused too much of an impact and shock, causing this originally fierce orc to unconsciously stop in the rear of the army. He stood there with a shocked expression, staring blankly at the last ring wraith that had dissipated like smoke. Even after being bumped hard by an orc running past him, he remained oblivious for a moment. Whoosh! 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 However, Liang Yue, the scoundrel, would not stop there. After successively eliminating these 18 elite boss monsters, He was in a great mood and decided to continue his point farming business, so he instantly sheathed the swords in his hands, and the dragon-slaying greatsword came online again, accompanied by short chopping sounds. This scoundrel once again plunged into the orc horde, beginning to repeatedly and tirelessly unleash the simplest and most direct sweeping attacks on the enemy troops. Bang! At this moment, the solar energy originally floating in the air had also reached its time limit and instantly split into countless fragments. Subsequently, it transformed into specks of circular light. Rapidly spreading towards the surrounding airspace and the earth like fireflies, they emitted a soft light, illuminating the originally dark world. Screech. In the distant sky, a group of giant eagles had also arrived just in time. Leading the way was the little female eagle, Rachel, who had briefly disappeared earlier. On her back, the elf princess Arwen was drawing her bow and nocking an arrow, waiting in full battle readiness. It seemed that this eagle and human had gone to get reinforcements. In addition, sitting on the backs of the giant eagles were also the brown-robed wizard Radagast and the skin changer Bjorn. In the original storyline, they had come to support the dwarves and elves at a critical moment in this war, and directly unleash powerful combat power, causing the orc army to lose their armor and abandon their weapons, fleeing in disarray. But now, they could at most only do some finishing work. They were here to steal my business, aren't they? No way. I have to speed up. Glancing at the flock of giant eagles flying closer and closer in the sky, as well as the allied forces of dwarves and elves in the rear camp, who had regained their morale after seeing the 9 ring wraiths being eliminated and were charging towards the battlefield, Liang Yue couldn't help but curse inwardly. So, he quickly waved the dragon-slaying greatsword in his hand and began to unleash sword aura attacks on the surrounding orcs without regard for the cost. In the end, this war gradually came to a close with the death of the orc leader, as needless to say, it was Liang Yue who killed this pale orc. In his eyes, although the other party was the leader of a tribe, his actual threat was not much greater than that of other orcs anyway. It's all just a matter of a horizontal slash. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183 Elf Dance Steps. Main Quest, Hunting Evil Smog. 1/1, Must Kill, Goblin King. 1/1 Azog. 1/1 Witch King. 9/9 White Warg King. 1/1 Dragon Rider Mounts. 9/9 Golem. 1/1 Side Quest, The Imbalance of Orcs Current Kills. 13,831 Amidst the unrestrained slaughter, in just a single day, Liang Yue had already reaped a considerable harvest, unable to contain himself with the orc leader Azog slain, and the orc army utterly collapsing, beginning to scatter and flee. Liang Yue could have continued to press the attack, seizing the opportunity to further elevate his score. However, in the end, he did not do so. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but after undergoing such high-intensity combat, this fellow discovered to his dismay that, just as he had gained a bit of free time, his mental state seemed to be unable to stop, and problems arose again just like the last time, after returning to the stronghold world from the new Shaolin 5 Ancestors plane. His heart was filled with violent emotions, and the slightest unsatisfactory event would trigger him to explode. Moreover, this time, the symptoms in Liang Yue's heart seemed to be even more severe than before. Concerning his own health and vital interests, Liang Yue dared not be negligent in the slightest. Therefore, almost as soon as those remnants of the orc army escaped the smog wasteland, he put away the weapon in his hand. He directly piled up a straight, approximately 4-meter-high stone pillar on the ground, then took out a bucket and poured water down from the top of the pillar. Subsequently, Liang Yue stood beneath the flowing water. Using the convenience of the infinite water source to forcibly calm himself down through physical means, a large amount of blood and debris was washed down from his armor, body, and hair, flowing in all directions. When the water flowed past him, it no longer carried any strange color or impurities, yet this fellow still kept his eyes closed and his brow furrowed as he bathed in it. After a long time, when Liang Yue finally felt that his whole body was cleansed and his heart began to calm down, he reopened his eyes unknowingly. The surrounding sky had completely darkened, but in his vision, those familiar comrades in arms were guarding him. One by one the gazes that looked over were almost all filled with worry. "Are you alright?" Liang Yue, seeing him open his eyes and slowly walk out of the water, the little hobbit Bilbo Baggins offered his greetings almost immediately. "Thank you for your concern, Bilbo. I just felt that there had been a bit too much killing, and I wanted to calm myself down and control the emotions in my heart. Hearing this, Liang Yue immediately showed a smile to him and the surrounding people, and a rare warmth arose in his heart. Your performance was indeed too outstanding, Liang Yue, but knowing how to regulate and restrain yourself is indeed a rare good habit. Gandalf, leaning on his staff, came to his side with a gratified smile. After speaking, he looked at the infinite water source that was still flowing down the stone pillar behind him, and then continued, I noticed that you just poured a bucket of water on it, but it has been flowing continuously. Is this some kind of magic? No, it's a kind of rule. The general situation is that every unit of water I acquire will automatically become a source of water that can continuously flow out water. Look at this land. Although it has been recovered by you, it is still barren. It will not be easy to restore it to its former appearance. However, if we can use your rule to create a long flowing lake for this lonely mountain, that would definitely be a good thing. In fact, I am not sure whether this special power of rules can be preserved after I leave Middle-earth. It doesn't matter. In fact, I just wanted to find something for you to do, Liang Yue, so that you can quickly smooth out the fluctuations in your heart in the days to come. I think you should understand what I mean. Alright, I do need to rest for a while, yes. But I may have to be busy for a while longer. Although we severely damaged Soren's forces on the Lonely Mountain battlefield this time, and all 9 ring wraiths were eliminated by you, the one ring is still there until it is thrown into the lava of Mount Doom and melted. We cannot relax for a day. Fortunately, the dwarves and elves have now reunited, but in the next period of time, I will have to continue to rush to those human kingdoms, striving to unite all the peaceful forces in Middle-earth. Only in this way can we ensure success in resisting Soren. Speaking of this, the old wizard looked at Liang Yue, who had already begun to shift his attention to Arwen, with a helpless smile on his face, and then seemed to suddenly remember something and continued, by the way, Liang Yue, I'm afraid you'll have to lend me Rachel first. With it carrying me soaring in the sky, it can save me a lot of trouble on my journey. Well, as long as Rachel herself agrees. After a great victory, a grand carnival party is naturally indispensable. In fact, while Liang Yue was irrigating himself with cold water, and Thorin, Gandalf, and others were guarding by his side, a group of dwarves from the Ironfoot Legion were already fully cleaning up the Lonely Mountain King's city. Moreover, since Smaug's invasion and occupation of this city carved inside the mountain, the dwarves had never entered here. Now that it has been recaptured, the daily necessities, such as food and meat, etc., that were sealed in some storage rooms in the past have long rotted into a pile of microorganisms and pests, but wine is not among them. Even if not all wines are suitable for long-term preservation, but as the former royal city of the dwarves, the reserves in its wine cellar are definitely not comparable to any random place. In addition, the food and supplies brought by the Ironfoot Legion this time, as well as the materials subsequently supported by the elves, are more than enough to cope with tonight's carnival. During the banquet, after everyone had their fill of food and wine, under the combined efforts of a group of elves skilled in playing musical instruments, a melodious piece of music began to slowly linger in the hall. A group of dwarves who were a little drunk at this time even began to embrace elegance, and several big men held hands and began to dance for a time. The hall was noisy, but the atmosphere was very joyful until the elven prince Legolas stood up at this time and invited his guard captain Toriel to come to the center of the stage. After an elven-style ballroom dance full of ritual, the atmosphere of the hall was finally brought back to normal rhythm. However, Liang Yue also noticed that the dance partner that the blonde little handsome guy wanted to invite at the beginning was actually the elven princess beside him. However, perhaps considering the difficulty involved, as well as someone's subsequent attitude, he had to settle for second best. Looking at the two elegant and graceful figures on the dance floor, Arwen seemed to be a little tempted at this time, so she looked at Liang Yue with anticipation. Oh well, I can't dance in the first place, let alone the dances of your Middle-earth. It doesn't matter, I'll teach you, okay. Chapter 184 Returning Mick. Since he had already agreed to work for Gandalf, Liang Yue put his words into action and officially entered the land reclamation and farming mode. In fact, although the terrain of Lonely Mountain was relatively high, it shouldn't have lacked water because it was surrounded by tall mountains and snow peaks, and the snowmelt from the high mountains. However, whether it was due to some black magic or a vicious curse, since Smaug's invasion, the original paradise, which was enough to support the cities of Durin and Dale, had officially entered a severe winter. The weather began to become unusually cold, as if it had suddenly entered a mini ice age. The ice peaks on the mountains, the rivers formed by the meltwater, and even the moats in front of the two cities, etc., had been in a state of frozen ice. To this, Liang Yue expressed that he had no way to deal with it. After all, Neither normal climate change nor the field of mystics such as black magic were his forte. What this guy could do now was to try his best to construct a water source area based on the terrain of the mountain valley in front of him, using the infinite water source characteristic of the McWorld. For this reason, after finishing his morning practice and having breakfast, Liang Yue began to pull Alwyn and hike towards the surrounding mountains. Since he was going to invest in water and in lakes, what he had to do first was naturally to observe the surrounding terrain, and then find a suitable place to build lakes or other water surface forms according to local conditions. What do you think of that side? The terrain undulates little, and it's only separated from the two cities by a mountain. It looks very suitable according to the information I learned from the sand table before. That area was originally a forest, but it was later burned to ashes by Smog's dragon flame. Thorin and the others seemed to be discussing what trees to replant there before. Oh, what about the other side then? Although the mountain range there is a bit more undulating, it is located below the snow line, and there are vaguely several sunken ditches connected in the middle. If there could be a stream of living water pouring down from above at this time, it would inevitably form a smooth river, and when it fell down the mountain, it could even create a continuous scene of cascading waterfalls. Just thinking about it is beautiful. Those several sunken ditches were originally the original river channels on Lonely Mountain. Although they have begun to become dry all year round due to Smog's invasion, but occasionally entering a period of hot weather, new water flows will form. Okay, just as Liang Yue was holding Alwyn's little hand, standing on a bare mountain head in his mind, pointing out a country around him, a long eagle's cry suddenly came from the sky behind him. The two immediately looked back and saw Gandalf in the blue sky above, wearing a pointed hat and sitting upright on the back of the giant eagle. Rachel, looking like a worldly expert vaguely, he seemed to be showing a meaningful smile to the two of them, and next to him, Bilbo Baggins was also impressively on the side at this time. This little hobbit was waving goodbye to the two with an excited look. Although the time spent on this expedition was not long, Bilbo's days away from his hometown added up to less than half a month. However, such a period, involving the racial conflicts between dwarves and elves, all kinds of grievances and feuds, the fate of countries and races, the war against justice and evil, etc., can be called an epic experience. In Liang Yue, this knight who came from another world, righteously slayed dragons, fought against evil orcs, and finally won the favor of the elven princess, and saved his life several times during the entire remote journey. Presumably, he will also occupy an important position in his life's memories. Right, have a good trip. Under the sunlight, Liang Yue and Alwyn were standing together at this time, waving goodbye to the two who were about to take the eagle away. A flash of brilliance, a change of light and shadow in front of him. After a full half year of training, Liang Yue, this guy, finally returned to the stronghold world. It was still the familiar library roof, still the bright night sky in the middle of the night, still the brightly lit small village, and the pure air with a strong natural fragrance lingering between the mouth and nose. What was different was that at this time, there was no longer only Liang Yue alone in the stronghold world. Welcome back, as large pieces of red rose petals were thrown into the air, and then slowly fell in the breeze, Teacher Shizuka plunged into his arms at this time. In addition, Takushima-san, Nanri Xiang, Takagi Yuriko, and Takagi Sayo were also standing beside him, looking at him and the others with smiles on their faces. On the wooden table not far away, there was a rich food being placed, and a strong aroma was wantonly scattered. However, Alwyn and the giant eagle Rachel beside Liang Yue, when they first arrived, were obviously still a little uncomfortable with the atmosphere here, and seemed a little restrained. Although in the past 6 months, they had not had less video calls with Sister Zixu and others to deepen their understanding, the communication across the system and face-to-face were obviously two different states. However, fortunately, they were not strangers to each other. After a period of tentative communication in the style of greetings, they quickly started chatting together, and before returning, in order to be able to integrate into the villagers group as soon as possible, Alwyn also took Rachel back to her home in Rivendell. In Lothlorien she searched for a batch of gorgeous and beautiful elven jewelry and clothing to give to everyone as a meeting gift. In comparison, the little female eagle Rachel was even more straightforward, directly from those giant eagle chicks that Liang Yue had successively sent into the stronghold world. In the process of training in the past half year, she promised 5 of them to Teacher Shizuka and the others as mounts. This gift was definitely heavy, but someone's feeling was that Rachel was selling cubs. In short, a welcome party that was not large in scale, but definitely not low in specifications, soon began grandly on the roof of the mountain village library. In this quiet world with a blessing of various wines and delicacies, the atmosphere of the welcome party quickly began to become lively. Due to her size, the giant eagle Rachel was a little difficult to integrate into, but fortunately, Liang Yu's language proficiency served as a bridge for communication, so she would not be neglected. Moreover, at this time, in the large divided food plate placed in front of this little female eagle, it was dragon meat. There were various steamed, roasted, fried, and fried dishes, and they were all full of portions obviously. In order to truly allow the giant eagle Rachel to feel the atmosphere of returning home, instead of being excluded and treated differently, Yuriko and the others had also put in a lot of effort. On the other hand, Liang Yu's side, with the appearance of the elven princess Alwyn, especially after Takagi Saya, teacher Shizuka and others became familiar with her, this male compatriot was completely neglected. On the side between women, there seems to be a natural existence of endless topics to talk about, and for a group of women living in modern cities, the elves like Alwyn who only exist in fantasy legends have a natural attraction to living habits, daily state, craftsmanship, and even the physical structure of the elves, etc. soon became the topic of their discussion along with the alcohol on their heads. Seeing this, Liang Yue played a piece of background music for the women with a record player unique to Mick, and then he very wisely slipped out of the banquet holding a glass of ale in his hand. He slowly walked down the library and put some of the books and practice methods he had collected on this trip on a separate bookshelf. Then, this guy went to the warehouse again and carefully sorted out the supplies in the storage space. Chapter 185 Or Who Master. During this experience in the world of The Hobbit, Liang Yue naturally gained a lot aside from the 1/15th of the wealth stipulated in the agreement in the Dwarven Lonely Mountain Kingdom. He didn't feel comfortable taking too much himself, so he only moved a batch of metal ingots and a box of fine gems from the dwarves' warehouse. In the subsequent experiences, this guy didn't idle around at all, especially the spoil seized in Mordor, the main base of the Dark Lord Sorin. The abundance of resources and wealth far exceeded ordinary people's imagination. As a monarch who once almost ruled and occupied the entire Middle-earth, Sorin's wealth was naturally unmatched by others. Even dwarves and elves would be ashamed of themselves in front of him. Moreover, Sorin actually obtained the forging skills of the elves. When it comes to the ability to create equipment, he is definitely a good hand. Don't look at the orc soldiers under his command, each wearing low-quality armor or simply shirtless, holding a wolf's tooth club in their hands, looking like a group of thugs who came from remote small places. But in fact, as long as someone in the dark camp reaches a certain status, they will basically have a set of special enhanced packages tailored for them. For example, the armor on the 9 ring wraiths is very powerful. Even if Liang Yue uses his strength to wield the Dragon Slayer sword, he can only leave a trace on it at most if they weren't undead creatures, completely countered by sunlight energy and the Undead Slayer spell. I'm afraid I would have to spend a lot of effort to deal with them. In addition, for example, the customized hand-changing service for the orc leader Azog, the magical battle patterns all over his body, the White Wolf King mount, etc., all cost a lot. As for how Sorin died, naturally, he was implicated and died after the One Ring was thrown into the lava lake of Mount Doom. As for how did he get into Mount Doom? First of all, it is definitely impossible to ride Rachel and take the sky route. You must know that although Sorin is no longer at his peak, as a powerful undead wizard, he is still very strong even in soul form at least. Gandalf is not his opponent on Liang Yue's side. If we only talk about close combat, he can be said to be fearless of anyone in Middle-earth, but if we add those weird magics, this sentence will have to be questioned. And Sorin's only remaining large magicka was standing at the highest point of Mordor City, always paying attention to the surrounding movements, riding Rachel all the way over. Liang Yue was really afraid that he would be shot down by the opponent's magic bullet, so, since the sky is not feasible, the ground is troublesome. When this guy entered Mount Doom, he could only honestly use his special skills and dig a hole from the ground. In the end, this guy went underground directly a few kilometers away, and dug a passage all the way into the inner wall of Mount Doom, about only 4 or 5 meters away from the lava lake, and through the One Ring inside. A moment later, the lava lake suddenly swelled, and the ground shook violently. Liang Yue was so frightened that he ran away. When he came out from the ground again, he found that Sorin was already dead. Of course, according to the normal plot development, this guy also knew clearly that after the death of the Dark Lord Sorin, a large number of soldiers under his command would instantly turn into ashes and completely disappear from Middle-earth. In order not to waste such a large number of manpower under Sorin's command, Liang Yue also formally took action and attracted the army in Mordor City many times through inducement and other methods before throwing the One Ring into the lava lake. Back and forth, he killed wildly for more than half a month. Moreover, in order to alleviate a mental pressure under his high-intensity hacking and killing, as well as the irritable emotions in his heart, Liang Yue actually unintentionally practiced the erhu proficiency skill to level 3 from the beginning when the sound was like a donkey's braying when pulling the strings, to the later barely audible, and then to the professional level represented by level 3. Liang Yue spent more than 2 months in this process. This speed is neither fast nor slow, but under the blessing of skill attributes, his erhu music has also improved to the point where he can barely be intoxicated by it. Erhu specialization level 310 current level 3 conventional musical instrument interpretation skills, including thousands of songs, recording the life, death, and separation of the world skill effect, calming the mind, calming the breath, nourishing the spirit, exorcising evil spirit plus 29 skill proficiency. 1881 3000. The fourth exorcism attribute in the skill effect is a new characteristic effect that appeared after Liang Yue upgraded the erhu specialization skill to the 3rd level. However, the name of this attribute is actually ambiguous according to Liang Yue's own personal experience. This so-called exorcism characteristic only refers to the ability to use music to dispel the evil thoughts in people's hearts for those serious undead, ghosts, evil spirits, fierce monsters, etc. This music has no ability to make them collapse and disappear on their own, but all in all, the erhu specialization skill still has a very powerful effect. With it, it can almost be said that Liang Yue has opened a musical side job. It is precisely because of it that he dares to continue to recklessly plunge into the midst of thousands of troops again without worrying about any future trouble. System, help me settle the rewards for this mission. After coming out of the warehouse, Liang Yue was a little tipsy at this time, holding the glass of ale, humming a little tune, and returning to the top of the library. The ale in his hand comes from Stardew Valley, directly brewed with hops, a specialty of that world. In a system improved barrel, the alcohol content of this wine itself is not very high, but as long as you drink it, it will definitely put you in a tipsy state. However, this tipsiness seems to be the ultimate effect of this ale, and there is also a time limit in addition. No matter how much you drink it, you will not get completely drunk. It is because of this characteristic that Liang Yue has gradually fallen in love with this wine recently, and likes to have a glass for himself when he has nothing to do. After testing, in the main mission hunting evil of this experience, the host completed the mission with a number exceeding the mission target by multiple times, and reached the conditions for reward promotion. In this regard, the reward given by the system is that the number of points is multiplied by 5. In addition, in this lottery privilege, the host can arbitrarily add a keyword to influence the range of prize selection. After testing, in the side mission unbalanced orcs of this experience, in addition to the minimum completion standard of 5,000 orc soldiers, the host also additionally killed 86,174 orc soldiers. Therefore, in addition to the 500 points in the mission reward, the host will also receive an additional reward of 86,174 points. After testing, in the side mission protecting innocence of this experience, the host successfully guarded the safety of the Hobbit Bilbo Baggins during the mission period, achieving the mission goal. Therefore, you will receive a Myriad Realms Warrior Weapon Can as a mission reward. The points reward for the main mission is 3,000, multiplied by 5 is 15,000, plus 86,000 for brushing orcs, then this has already exceeded 100,000 oil. After finishing this wave, I don't have to worry about not having enough points for the time being. Let's not talk about other things first. I have to buy a few more sunflowers that can attract solar energy from the sky. I remember the thing sells for 200 points a tree, right? Cheap. Such a good thing, isn't it? Okay to have 10 more. As for the mission reward, let's draw a lottery first. Use the lottery opportunity first. As for keywords, magic power is still a big problem, but there is no good way for the time being techniques. I don't lack this thing now, so I'll practice Dazu Fist first. As for skills, the randomness of this thing is too great. Besides the observation technique being a little more reliable, ricochet and magic pattern are still on my body. Why don't I try supernatural powers, to test the waters? Okay. Then use supernatural power as the keyword. After sitting back in his seat, Liang Yue picked up a piece of watermelon and took a bite. Then Liang Yue's eyes swept around a group of red-faced women who were going crazy with drinking, and a strange smile suddenly appeared on his face. Who knew that this guy's smile was caught by Yuriko Takagi on the opposite side? So she hurriedly cleaned herself up. After spending a lot of brain power, she finally said with some hesitation, "Ding. The keyword supernatural power has been confirmed. Does the host want to draw a lottery immediately?" Draw. Draw now. Chapter 186 Hair Manipulation. As Liang Yue's words fell, the familiar roulette wheel, black background and red needle, appeared in front of him again as this lottery was tagged with a keyword ability by him. The prizes appearing in each prize area were actually balls of light of various colors, colorful and dazzling. Some were round like ping pong balls, some had fillings inside, looking like the glass marbles he played with when he was a kid. Some had uneven surfaces, either pitted or radiant, showing different shapes. Looking at the dense glowing spheres on the roulette, Liang Yue immediately felt a lot more relieved. Obviously, in the field of keyword abilities, the lottery items given by the system were quite substantial if he guessed correctly. Each small sphere was an ability, although he couldn't judge what most of them were, but in fact, with abilities, he would almost make a profit no matter which one he chose. Thinking of this, Liang Yue's heart suddenly warmed up, and he couldn't wait to order the system start. Stop. Ling. Congratulations to the host. In this lottery welfare, you have won the ability hair manipulation. Please explore the specific functions yourself. In addition, abilities have certain requirements and limitations on the user's body at this stage. The host can only possess one ability. As soon as the system's voice fell, the roulette wheel disappeared, and only a hairy egg emitting a gray halo remained in front of him. Then it turned into a stream of light and shot towards Liang Yue with a whoosh, so this guy immediately headbutted, his forehead heavily hitting the solid wood desk in front of him, and he fainted when he opened his eyes again. It was already dawn, and Liang Yue was already lying on a bed without realizing it. Around him, senior sister, Saya Takagi, and Alvin were leaning close, whispering to each other. Liang Yue, you're awake? How do you feel? Why did you suddenly faint before? Seeing this guy wake up, Alwan sent her greetings immediately, with a concerned look on her face. Her voice soft and nice. Sikobir Sujima next to her seemed much calmer, with a tranquil look, as if she was full of confidence in someone hearing her words. Saya Takagi, with her pink twintails, even curled her lips at this time, muttering in a low voice, I told you, he was drawing a lottery last night. I did get a benefit last night, from the system, but I didn't expect it to come so quickly. My brain couldn't react a bit when I received it. Moreover, my body seems to have undergone a deep transformation. As he spoke, Liang Yue pretended to be awakened, sat up from the bed, stretched his arms and shook his legs, seemingly experiencing the changes. What kind of ability did you get? If it can make you faint, it should be very strong, right? Saya Takagi sat on the bed at this time, asking curiously, and the faces of the two girls next to her were also filled with anticipation. Seeing this, a flash of embarrassment flashed in Liang Yue's eyes. Unconsciously, he spread his hands towards them, and then somewhat helplessly told the three girls about the gray hairy egg last night, and the hair manipulation ability level 110 current level 1 an instinctive manipulation method from the genetic level. In principle, the stronger the mental power, the more powerful the ability can be. Skill effect, limited control over the length, curvature, and extension of hair characteristics, infinite, as long as there is energy. It can be regenerated indefinitely. Ability proficiency 0-1000. After a night of digestion, Liang Yue had actually completely received this transformation and introduction information about the ability. Moreover, as this guy gradually regained consciousness, he was slowly recalling the relevant content in his mind as an ability. The capabilities included in hair manipulation are actually much richer than what is written on the panel. Moreover, the potential of this ability itself is actually not bad, but even so, it still couldn't hide the disappointment in Liang Yue's heart for this lottery. This is freaking. Even if I can't draw abilities with heaven-defying characteristics like time, space, or causality, then give me an ability like metal, wood, water, fire, or speed. Is that too much to ask? Hair manipulation. I can't believe you can come up with that. Is it because my hair grows long after each experience and it's inconvenient? You are so considerate. Sigh. If I remember correctly, the system seemed to have said last night that, with my current physical fitness, I can only possess one ability for the time being. In reality, hair manipulation? Is this ability very powerful? Just this, it can make you faint. The little pink-haired girl next to him looked a bit puzzled after hearing Liang Yue's explanation, and her eyes were filled with doubts. In order to respond to her doubts, although someone was not very satisfied in his heart, in order to maintain his old face, he could only brace himself and raise his hands to the girl. Then, he silently activated the not-so-skilled ability in his body. Suddenly, the inconspicuous hairs on the back of Liang Yue's hands began to become dense, black, and long, standing up straight. About 5 seconds later, these black hairs grew to the limit he could currently control, about 10 centimeters long. Then, Liang Yue stretched out his pair of black haired hands and made a kneading gesture towards Sayatakaji as his fingers and the back of his hands swayed. The black and shiny hair above also began to ripple and dance. How disgusting. Is that all? Seeing this, Sayatakaji immediately hid behind, covering her small mouth and frowning. For now, after all, I haven't started practicing yet. It will definitely become longer and thicker in the future, and even turning hair into steel is not a dream. As he spoke, Liang Yue silently activated his ability again, shrinking the black hair that was originally swaying in the wind back, and then looked at Sayatakaji opposite him. Come here, let me touch your head. What do you want to do by touching my head? I'll give you a magic trick. What magic trick? This ability of mine can not only make hair longer and shorter, but also make it fall directly. Come here and let me pluck your hair. Wow. How annoying. By the way, what time is it now? After coming out of the room, Liang Yue looked at the sun that had already risen a small piece from the distant mountains, and subconsciously muttered, then summoned the system clock. Speaking of which, after the previous permission upgrade, Liang Yue also clearly felt that the services provided to him by the system had become much more advanced. Even the most basic clock in front of him has changed from 1 to 3 among them. One clock is labeled with a real time, one shows the base world. And there is also a countdown clock that can be used to measure the time limit for trials in the heavens and worlds. Let me see, it's a little after 7 now, the real world is a little after 6, it's still early. With this in mind, Liang Yue led the 3 girls next to him to the wooden table where they had been eating and drinking before the mess from last night had been cleaned up, and now the table was rearranged with a pile of fresh fruits and vegetables, as well as fried eggs, bread, and milk. According to senior sister, this was prepared by Siko and the others before they left, and now, teacher Shizuka, Siko, and Yuriko Takaji, 3, had already taken Rachel to a mountain outside the village early in the morning. Said to be helping the little female eagle to feed those chicks. Bang! With a flick of his sleeve, a jar the size of a basketball, with an earthy yellow color and a pair of mud ears on its mouth and neck, was thrown on the table in front of him by someone. Feeling all one and the other's gazes, Liang Yue picked up the milk at hand, took a sip unhurriedly, and then explained to them, this is another reward I got from my experience in Middle-earth, a weapon jar. You can randomly open a weapon with it. It is said to be a warrior level 1 is the weapon that appears completely random, senior sister asked at this time, her crystal eyes shining brightly. Yes, and the scope of weapon selection includes the heavens and worlds. Liang Yue scratched the lid of the jar with his finger and nodded. Have you used this kind of jar before? Sayatakaji hugged her arms at this time, lying on the table looking at him. I have, but that was a low-level product. It could only open the most entry-level weapons. As he spoke, Liang Yue's mind moved, and he quickly found the wooden hand crossbow from a storage box in the warehouse and placed it on the table in front of him. This crossbow looks like the workmanship is very poor. As an expert in the archer profession, Alwyn glanced at it and saw the situation of this hand crossbow. Almost actually, it's not just the workmanship that's bad, the range is only less than 20 meters, the power is small, and the trajectory is scattered. But this is a weapon from the game world. It can fire arrows infinitely. When I was an ordinary person, I relied on it to survive in this base world. Infinite arrows. Chapter 187 Infinite Ammo Piercer. System, start opening the jar. Immediately, as Liang Yue's voice fell, the yellowish-brown earthenware jar on the table in front of everyone began to tremble. A few seconds later, it began to intensify. It looked as if there was a rabbit inside, kicking its legs rapidly, trying to break free from the jar. Soon, pieces of broken tile began to fall continuously, clattering on the ground. Seeing this, Liang Yue's face suddenly revealed a hint of surprise, and then he immediately beckoned the other 3 girls watching to retreat. I never encountered this situation when I opened jars before. Crack, crack, crack. At this moment, cracks suddenly covered the earthenware jar, and dazzling rays of treasure light shone out from the cracks, causing the girls beside him to unconsciously widen their eyes. Bang! At this moment, the jar finally shattered completely, scattering in all directions, leaving a mess on the ground, and even everyone's breakfast was not spared on the solid wood table. Only a pair of guns remained. Those were a pair of handguns. The whole body was black, and the surface was inlaid with the gold silk patterns, shining brightly under the soft morning light. Its shape and structure had a hint of obscure steampunk style, but it was not noticeable on the black gun body. The barrel was thicker than ordinary pistols, and the shape was longer between the flow of light. The sharp-edged gun body seemed to have a glaze flowing unconsciously. Liang Yue quickly approached and picked up one of them, and it was not until this moment that the system's prompt sound arrived. Lating. Congratulations to the host for drawing the warrior level brown equipment dual guns infinite ammo, penetrator, This equipment comes from a certain fantasy game world, Infinite Ammo. From the game world Infinite Ammo, Penetrator top grade quality brown warrior level weapon physical attack power plus 298 magical attack power plus 300 independent attack power plus 99 strength plus 28 agility plus 15 stamina plus 10 fastest rate of fire 10 rounds effective range 300 meters has an 80% chance to deal penetrating attacks to the target durability 99 no level restrictions. It's just a low level brown equipment, it's a bit to use it for transition and leveling, why not add it to 15? So it can be used as a toy and put it in my diamond-encrusted Terashi warehouse relying on the feel cultivated by a large number of actual combat exercises. In just a while, this guy could already skillfully play with it in the palm of his hand various rotations. Spins, showing off operations. That's right, I remember when the system said before that the operating mechanism of the mall is to put all the items I once obtained in system activities on the shelf. So now thinking of this, Liang Yue immediately moved his mind and summoned the system wall that was still the familiar cottage online game-style shop counter. After his painstaking management, the goods on the shelves have now taken shape, and a batch of good things have been stored. With a sweep of his eyes, Liang Yue indeed found the figure of this pair of warrior-level dual guns in the newest grid of the shelf. The price is 5,000? This price is a bit outrageous. Speaking of which, although the attributes of this pair of guns are indeed good, in the myriad worlds, it is at most an entry-level equipment, and it is already 5,000. If I brush out real good things in the future, wouldn't it cost tens of thousands at every turn? It seems that as I earn more and more points now, the goods in this mall are starting to become more and more valuable. With a hint of fainted pain, Liang Yue glanced at the more than 100,000 points below his mall at this time. Originally, he thought this should already be a huge sum of money, and he could finally take a temporary break and enjoy his leisure life after retirement. Buy whatever you want, eat whatever you want, but now it seems that he has just started on the road. Liang Yue identity, acquired peak warrior inner strength, 35,000 strength, 218 agility, 235 constitution, 225 stamina, 297 bloodline, human, sealed, talents, vigorous stamina, affinity, fire resistance ability, hair manipulation skills, language proficiency, ricochet, inactive, advanced gunmanship proficiency, basic swordsmanship, observation technique, magic aureole, inactive, Erhu proficiency abilities, simple tool making, mech game character, reverse joint grappling cultivation methods, golden bell cover, mixed yuanguang, hangshan swordsmanship, a read across the river, unnamed meditation technique, Desu fist hangshan sword play level 510 current level 5A rare sword technique in the Buddhist lineage that focuses on killing, known for its fierce moves and strange techniques. Cultivation method effect, sword attack power plus 101 sword accuracy plus 18% attack speed plus 18% sword attack power plus 12% proficiency. 4,873 10,000 A read across the river level 510 current level 5A lightness skill passed down by Bodhidharma of Shaolin. It is said that when practiced to the highest level, one can cross the rivers and lakes with a reed. Cultivation method effect, jumping power plus 20% movement speed plus 15% agility plus 21 constitution plus 10 mid-air read movement speed plus 30%, requires consumption of internal force, proficiency. 8,775 10,000 Dazu fist level 27 current level 2A unique ancient Chinese martial arts inheritance. The content covers a wide range, and practicing to the highest level can transform the body and reshape oneself. Cultivation method effect, understand and master the muscles and tendons of the waist, abdomen, and limbs. Strength plus 50% agility plus 50% constitution plus 50% stamina plus 20 cultivation method proficiency. 18,730,000. This Dazu fist is a very special cultivation method for Liang Yue. Its main function at present is not to increase one's physical fitness and four-dimensional attributes, but to allow Liang Yue to continuously control himself, control those muscles, tendons, and meridians on his body that he had not been able to use before, so that he can exert his potential power that he should have had, but was completely unaware of, between every move and every style. By integrating and mastering one's existing qualities, truly mastering oneself, so as to exert greater physical potential effects. Therefore, in the cultivation method effect in the panel, there is almost no substantial increase in strength, agility, and constitution. because Liang Yue has actually practiced the various exercises involved in this cultivation method. In other cultivation methods, its true function lies in making oneself more handy and controlling these human body structures that were never noticed before, thereby greatly increasing one's strength, agility, speed, and so on. Looking at this character attribute panel, which he was originally a little proud of, Liang Yue suddenly felt a sense of boredom from the bottom of his heart at this time. Alice, it seems that my ability is still a bit useless, the cause is not yet successful, comrades still need to work hard. That's right, didn't you say that after the permission upgrade, a copy mode was also opened? System, putting the gun in his hand on the table, Liang Yue then remembered what he had not finished last night, and subconsciously looked at the time on the real-time clock. Well, it's still past 6 o'clock, so he secretly decided to solve the problem of this copy first, and then go to schooling. Please host select a suitable location for the copy gate. Copy gate. After listening to the system's words, Liang Yue's mind subconsciously appeared in a certain World of Warcraft online game, the kind of copy blocked behind a huge streamer vortex. That kind of scene seems very spectacular. Oh, nodding to himself, a look of sudden realization appeared on his old face, and then this guy quickly looked around, taking in the entire village and the surrounding area. Between thoughts, Liang Yue quickly thought of a suitable area. It's better to keep the village in this peaceful state, but if it's in the wild, I'm afraid something will accidentally break in, so it's better to put this copy gate underground. Screech! At this moment, a hawk cry suddenly sounded in the distant sky, and everyone looked up at the sound. I saw at the end of the sky, between the continuous snow-capped mountains, a black spot was flying towards this side quickly. Needless to say, dare to blatantly fly across Liang Yue's territory like this, it must be the giant eagle Rachel. Soon, this little female eagle became bigger and bigger in everyone's sight, and the outline gradually became clear. The 3 people she was carrying on her back had also slowly appeared. Flap, flap, flap. A moment later, accompanied by the gust of wind that suddenly blew up on the roof of the library, Rachel flapped her huge wings at this time, and landed steadily on the roof. In the excited eyes of Sayataka Shiro and Yuriko teacher Shizuka, Sikobir Sujima, and Aunt Yuriko jumped off her back one after another, and walked towards them with faces full of surprise and enjoyment. Speaking of which, why did you build a nest so far away? It looks like it's tens of miles away from here, right? Liang Yue came to the giant eagle Rachel's side at this time, and after slightly measuring her size and height, he casually asked. Rachel raised her eyelids when she heard the words, looked down at him and replied, this is a matter of living habits. Eagles should have their own territory and territorial awareness. Living in this village is too comfortable. At least before they grow up, I will not allow them to enter here. Chapter 188. Back to school. After returning to campus, whether it was Liang Yue's imagination or not, he felt that the moment he stepped into the school gate, his originally somewhat restless heart immediately calmed down. Perhaps this was the unique charm of a place dedicated to education. Looking at the crowds of chattering peers bustling around, Liang Yue, who had just finished a half-year journey in another world, suddenly felt a sense of fulfillment and tranquility in his heart. This feeling was as if the previous dwarf expedition, dragon slaying, battles with orcs, military service, magic, the Dark Lord Soren, and other personal experiences were all just unexpected interludes, like a summer camp that was unexpectedly added to his life. Now that this journey was over, the campus life before him was the main theme of his life. He was now simply returning to his normal rhythm of life. With this thought in mind, Liang Yue immediately felt as if he had seen through many things. His mood was relaxed, and his thoughts were clear. He wouldn't dare say that he had completely cleared up the after effects of excessive killing, but he felt much more relaxed. What's wrong? After pushing the door open and entering the classroom, Liang Yue clearly felt that the eyes of the classmates suddenly focused on him, filled with a strong sense of heat. Although, in this guy's heart, he had always felt that he was the main character, and becoming the focus of the class was only a matter of course. The current situation was obviously a bit abnormal, so, after sitting down in his usual seat, Liang Yue subconsciously turned to Sam and Holland, who were sitting behind him, looking at him with equally enthusiastic eyes, and asked about the reason. You don't know? Holland looked at him with a shocked expression. Oh my god. Your novel has made it onto the North American bestseller list, Liang Yue, the one called A Song of Ice and Fire. The original author doesn't even know. Sam also had the same expression at this time, looking at him like livestock, as if he wanted to swallow him in one bite. Oh, you're talking about the bestseller thing. I know about that. Actually, the publisher sent me an email about it a week ago. By the way, they also settled my royalties for the previous few weeks. Liang Yue immediately reacted when he heard this. But when he talked about this matter, this guy's expression didn't change at all. There was nothing he could do. He had an independent world as a logistics base, and he usually used gold as currency in the various worlds. Now, his account just had a bunch of extra numbers. The royalties have already arrived. Ahem. Is it convenient to say how much money there is? In fact, relative to the bestseller thing, what Sam and Peter valued more was naturally the US dollars represented behind that list. After all, Holland was originally a child from a poor family. His parents died, and he had been living in his Aunt May's house since he was a child. Then, in a pile of second-hand goods that could almost be used as scrap iron, Sam miraculously chose Bumblebee and, incidentally, got Megan as his girlfriend. Probably a few $100,000. My book is selling pretty well. Oh my god. I estimate that I won't be able to earn that much money in half my life. Liang Yue, in a few months, it'll be a lifetime. Sam, and me too. Haven't you ever thought about doing something with that money? Yes, I wanted to buy a piece of land before. But later I found that the farms and ranches near New York are too expensive, not to mention the manors, so I have to continue to earn money. Ahem. Well, since your novel is on the North American bestseller list, and it's said that the word of mouth is very good, and it will continue to sell well in the future, shouldn't we celebrate it? Yes. We should definitely celebrate. Saying that, Sam and Holland looked at Liang Yue, their eyes full of anticipation. What else could Liang Yue say at this time? He could only pretend to have an expression of, oh, that's a great idea, my old buddies, and say to these two fools, then how about this Saturday? You come to my house, I'll treat you, and call a few more classmates. Yeah. Don't worry, Liang Yue, I will definitely call a few more good friends to congratulate you. Don't forget to prepare more delicious food. It's too troublesome to prepare food when there are too many people, especially Chinese food. Why don't we just eat barbecue at that time? Beef, mutton, seafood, etc., and then I'll prepare some meat. Yes. That's how it should be. Liang Yue. I can't wait. Great, I like it. After finishing a day of classes, Liang Yue didn't even have time to report to the swordsmanship club, and Elizabeth directly dragged him out of the classroom to go shopping. However, the reason this girl used was also very legitimate, that is, to take him to order a few handmade suits in order to cope with the opening banquet of the Stark Group in a few days. Speaking of which, after experiencing half a year of training in the Hobbit world, Liang Yue had grown taller again at this time, but the increase was not very large, only 4 centimeters, and basically all of it was in his legs under this circumstance. Most of the clothes he bought before could still be worn, and Liang Yue also had a feeling that his current height had basically reached its limit, and if there were no uncontrollable factors involved, it should not change again in a short time. In addition, he was relatively wealthy at the moment, so buying clothes was indeed something that should be included in the normal shopping procedure. In this way, holding Elizabeth's little hand, he strolled on the street for a few hours, and also under the suggestion of this blonde girl, Liang Yue measured his figure size in a tailor shop and placed an order for 3 suits. After finishing, the sky had already darkened, and the two naturally walked into a restaurant, listening to music, and started a romantic dinner. Chapter 189. Hate. Your recent changes seem quite significant. Oh? What's changed? Haven't I always been like this? It's just that my height has increased by 4 centimeters. Right, HMPH, I'm talking about your temperament. Before you were at most a little wolf pup, here later, you turned into a wolf, and now as she spoke, Elizabeth, sitting across the table, put down her cutlery, picked up the champagne next to her, and took a small sip. Her eyes remained fixed on Liang Yue, her gaze shifting from playful to serious, revealing a thoughtful look. What do I seem like now? Liang Yue smiled slightly at this moment, meeting the gaze of the blonde beauty. You now seem like a crouching dragon, the kind that could lash out and hurt someone at any moment. As she spoke, Elizabeth suddenly extended a gentle hand towards him, lightly rubbing his forehead and brow, as if trying to smooth out a trace of imperceptible ferocity between his brows. Don't you really feel it yourself? Although I don't know what you've experienced in this short period, your expression, your eyes, and your demeanor are clearly completely different from yesterday. Upon hearing this, Liang Yue gently grasped her hand, lightly kissed the back of it, and then looked at Elizabeth across from him with a smile, saying, I have indeed experienced some things. Roughly, it was making a group of friends and then helping them reclaim their former homeland, but the specific details are not yet appropriate to tell you. As he spoke, he flipped his sleeve, and a square, palm-sized jewelry box appeared in his hand with a soft snap sound. The moment the box lid popped open, revealed in the air was a silver-white ring, reflecting a dazzling brilliance under the light. The design of this ring was very unique, like a blooming silver flower, with a large diamond encased beneath the hollowed-out petals. As the light flowed, the crystalline brilliance shone through the petals, appearing exceptionally radiant almost the instant the jewelry box was opened. The ring seemed to become the focus of the entire room. The soft chatter in the room gradually quieted down, as if everyone present was holding their breath at the brilliance of the ring. Some diners who inadvertently glanced at the two of them could no longer look away after their gaze lingered on the ring for a moment. Sounds of amazement and exclamation then continuously echoed in the restaurant. Elizabeth, sitting across from Liang Yue, now had a sparkle in her eyes. Slowly, a trace of watery light even appeared deep within her eyes, containing nervousness, shyness, and a hint of obvious hesitation. However, Liang Yue's next actions did not put her in a dilemma. After taking the ring out of the box, he gently placed it on the right index finger of the blonde beauty in front of him, who was already becoming somewhat at a loss. The size of the ring actually perfectly matched her. "I thought you were going to propose to me." Looking at the star-like ring on her finger, Elizabeth lowered her head slightly, her tone carrying a mixture of joy and regret. She also didn't quite dare to look Liang Yue in the eyes. Now is not the right time. Besides, as a gentleman, how can I put his lady in a difficult position? Liang Yue seemed quite normal at this time. After all, he had long been aware of this woman's background. Given her status, she certainly couldn't make promises to others casually. This ring must be very precious, right? Elizabeth was still looking down at this time, her voice coming faintly. "Yes, it's forged entirely from mithril, with elven craftsmanship, plus a flawless gem. It would indeed be very difficult to find in this world." "That's right, this ring is none other than the famous elven ring of water from Middle-earth, also known as the diamond ring. Of course, this is definitely not the genuine article, but it's about the same. This was loot that Liang Yue found in the treasure vault of the Dark Lord Soren. According to the old wizard Gandalf's appraisal, this should be Soren's trial piece before he formally began forging the elven ring of water. However, as a Dark Lord who once nearly ruled the entire Middle-earth, even if it was just a trial piece, he still poured a lot of effort into it. Whether it was the design concept, the mithril used to create the ring, or the gem, they were all very rare and exquisite items. Then, she raised her slender hand, placed the ring next to her face, and gave him a sweet and touching smile, accompanied by the shining brilliance. "Thank you, I really like this gift." Boom! Just at this moment, an explosion suddenly came from the street outside the window. Even without looking, Liang Yue could tell from the sound that the explosion was not far from the restaurant where they were. Immediately afterward, a rough roar rang out, shaking the glass beside the two of them until it began to hum. Subsequently, accompanied by a huge roar and the sound of shattering, the street rang out with the distinctive, rapid-fire frequency of machine gun fire. Buzz bullets carrying flames struck a yellowish-brown monster, but were unexpectedly bounced off. Even the restaurant where Liang Yue and the others were was affected. Stray bullets left deep marks on the walls, and some even happened to penetrate the glass, shattering the chandelier on the ceiling. The diners who had been quietly enjoying their dinner now burst into terrified screams, rising and fleeing in the blink of an eye. The originally elegant restaurant was thrown into a chaotic mess. Liang Yue shielded Elizabeth behind him and looked down through the window in front of him. He only inadvertently exchanged a glance with a big guy below, who was being bombarded by the army's machine guns, but unexpectedly, this immediately provoked the other party's retaliation. With a whoosh sound, a red Ferrari sports car on the street was immediately caught in the crossfire, directly grabbed by the yellowish-brown figure, and thrown forcefully towards the window where Liang Yue was. Abomination! Looking at the figure below, whose spine was covered with barbs, a murderous intent flashed in Liang Yue's eyes, and he immediately identified the other party's identity at first glance. At the same time, he flipped his sleeve, and after a series of quick hand movements, 2 rows of thick stone pillars were instantly piled up by the window in front of him. Bang! Accompanied by a dull impact, the floor-to-ceiling glass shattered instantly, and the window frame flew in all directions. However, due to the obstruction of the stone pillars, the flying sports car was not able to break through the window. Liang Yue was still looking at the figure on the street, constantly smashing, rampaging, roaring, and his originally calm face was now distorted and changing color. Through the gap between the stone pillars and the window in front of him, the gaze he cast at the other party unconsciously revealed traces of bloodshot eyes. "Madam, there's been a bit of an accident outside. The American National Army is dealing with that monster. We'd better leave quickly through the back door." Elizabeth's loyal bodyguards also came quickly from all corners at this time. One of them, a middle-aged blond man wearing a well-fitting suit and his hair neatly combed, glanced at the ring on her hand and then spoke in a calm and unhurried British accent. "Liang Yue, let's go." Upon hearing this, Elizabeth turned back to look at someone by the window and said softly, "You go first. I need to go deal with that thing outside." As he spoke, Liang Yue turned back and gave the blonde beauty behind him a slightly stiff smile, then flipped his sleeve, and a pickaxe suddenly appeared in his hand. Bang bang bang. With a few quick strikes, he knocked the 2 stone pillars he had just piled up into small rock cubes, automatically storing them in the storage space. Then, with a thought, the neatly dressed modern attire he had been wearing was instantly replaced with a complete set of metal armor. Only the helmet that he had always regarded as a burden remained in the storage space. Instead, it was replaced by a piece of red silk cloth, covering the area below his nose. Kicking the sports car in front of him with his foot, the red Ferrari rolled and flew 7 or 8 meters away. Metal combat boots stepped on the broken glass shards, making a creaking sound. Helicopters were constantly circling in the sky, and searchlights cast blindingly bright white beams. Liang Yue flipped his sleeve, and 2 standard-issue long swords were instantly grasped in his hands, and he walked step by step along the chaotic street towards the figure not far away, who had quickly dealt with the armored vehicles and machine gunners. Liang Yue, be careful. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 191. Encounter. Knock down the hatred. Elizabeth's cries had absolutely no effect because Liang Yue at this moment urgently needed to vent the violent emotions in his heart. At the same time, he also really didn't understand why the state of mind that he had originally suppressed so well would suddenly surge up at this moment. But now, this guy couldn't care about so much anymore. Anyway, a correct target was right in front of him. Therefore, Liang Yue knew that at this moment, he just needed to stop talking nonsense and get it done. The abomination, only a few dozen meters away, seemed to have turned its gaze over here because of Elizabeth's instructions. Now that's great. After seeing Liang Yue dressed in armor and holding 2 swords, this big guy, whose main body was a U.S. Special Forces soldier, immediately revealed a face full of disdain. Immediately afterward, he opened his big mouth and let out a burst of arrogant laughter. Ha 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 ha. Seeing this, Liang Yue didn't care. The violent emotions that he had almost been unable to suppress on his face had now begun to calm down. However, this wasn't because the emotions in his heart had been soothed. Quite the opposite. At this moment, he was about to wholeheartedly throw himself into this upcoming battle. In the excitement in his heart, he simply didn't have the mind to consider suppressing or surging emotions anymore. Having entered a battle state, he was now only thinking about how to kill that poop yellow guy opposite him. Whoosh. At this moment, under full power, an invisible airflow actually began to slowly generate with the movement of Liang Yue's footsteps that seemed to be the legendary aura, or the ethereal murderous aura, spreading around him as he advanced. Unhurriedly, pieces of dust and paper scraps were rapidly scattered under the surge of this airflow. Finally, even Liang Yue's black hair, originally tied behind his head, was now flying unrestrainedly, strand by strand, like ripples of water, rippling behind his head. Hair standing on end. Perhaps that was describing his current state. Roar. When the abomination on the opposite side saw this, the whole person immediately became excited and unconsciously clenched his fists. As a Special Forces member who was already approaching the limit of his career and whose condition had begun to gradually decline due to age restrictions, it was because he yearned for power and longed to fight against stronger existences that he disregarded his own life and risked injecting Hulk screen blood. Now that his power had surged and his emotions were out of control, his most desired instinct was naturally to have a hearty battle. Hulk couldn't be found for the time being, but now a target had taken the initiative to come to him. Fight, as long as he could fight. All the principles, country, position, and honor that he needed to adhere to in the past could all be thrown aside. Roar. After a hearty roar, the abomination strode forward, grinning as he rushed towards Liang Yue. Under the blessing of powerful strength, each step and stomp he took could leave a deep footprint in the hard ground, and give him even greater propulsion. Bang. Amidst the splashing of soil and rocks, the abomination's thick legs immediately kicked, and the whole person suddenly leaped high into the air. Under the blessing of great strength, the whole person suddenly drew a fierce parabola, aggressively, just like a tiger released from its cage. Liang Yue at this time naturally wouldn't show any weakness, and eager to vent his inner irritability, he chose to confront him head-on. However, this guy could be considered to have experienced many battles, and he had also practiced orthodox martial arts inheritance techniques. He naturally had his own set of standards in his mind for how to deal with the enemy. So, when heading towards the other party, Liang Yue at this moment chose to jog slowly, unhurriedly, but his eyes had been fixed on the other party's action. Seeing that the poop yellow guy opposite him actually jumped up at him, he smiled because this proved that although the other party was once a veteran special soldier, the real fighting experience was just like his current body color, a pile of poop. This is indeed looking down on me. At the moment when the other party leaped up, many thoughts flashed through Liang Yue's mind, but at the same time, he subconsciously made what he believed to be the most correct choice facing the abomination's aggressive pounce. Liang Yue at this time did not retreat but advanced, instantly accelerating and rushing towards the other party head-on, raising both swords. It seemed that he was going to confront him head-on, but when facing the other party's powerful and heavy punch towards his head, this guy instantly ducked, and then slid past from under the other party's crotch. At the same time, the swords in his hands were directly aimed at the two groins inside the abomination's thighs, and he slashed with a momentum. Whoosh, the sword light flashed, accompanied by a strange sizzle sound as poop yellow big guy suddenly lost his footing and fell heavily to the ground along with the blood flying everywhere. The abomination was now covering the roots of his thighs with a twisted face, constantly rolling on the ground while the painful wailing in his mouth. Every man understands, in fact, not only this poop yellow big guy himself, but even those few troops who are secretly vigilant about the battle here. General Ross, who is hovering in the sky in a helicopter, Dr. Banner, the owner of the original Hulk, and those male reporters who were sitting in another civilian plane and doing live broadcasts, even the SHIELD personnel who might be watching the live broadcast through roadside monitoring facilities at this time. They all showed a face of empathy, and a trace of pity unconsciously rose on their faces. On the other hand, Liang Yue was still looking calm at this time. He kept walking around the abomination, maintaining a safe distance, but did not take advantage of the victory to pursue what he needed now was to vent, not simply kill the other party. The sneak attack just now obviously couldn't let him have enough fun. Get up, don't pretend to be dead on the ground. Where's the recklessness you had before? Why are you like a sissy now, with tears starting to fall? Soon, Liang Yue's provocation seemed to have worked. As a supervillain with powerful healing abilities, the abomination's self-repair ability was not as good as Hulk's, but he could still repair the injuries on his body within a certain amount of time. Liang Yue's two swords just now were indeed fierce, and the angles were tricky, straight to the other party's vital parts, but they were not enough to make the other party lose his ability to move all at once. Look, in just a few breaths, the other party's crotch had already stopped bleeding. The original painful expression had also begun to become more and more fierce. Wah! Accompanied by a roar of rage. The abomination at this time was like a toad, supporting the ground with both hands, and with his legs that had not yet healed as an aid, his limbs suddenly exerted force and pounced towards him. Chapter 191 Behead. Compared to the previous abomination, the injured abomination at this time was like a ferocious beast. Its movements were inconvenient, but its momentum was even stronger. Accompanied by heavy breathing, the abomination, with its fists as hammers, leaped into the air and pounced towards Liang Yue, using its momentum to smash down on his head. Boom! Accompanied by a violent sound of earth and stone collapsing. However, this time Liang Yue did not choose to confront the opponent head-on. With a light leap backward, he dodged 3 or 4 meters away. Seeing this, the abomination was naturally unwilling. It roared angrily, then leaped up again and hammered down heavily. Liang Yue dodged again, lightly jumping 5 or 6 meters backward. Looking at the opponent, there was still a hint of playful smile in his eyes. The way he looked was like he was walking a dog, and this fellow's performance naturally further angered the opponent, so the abomination once again roared at someone with an even more shocking volume. Then, jump again, hammer again, boom, accompanied by the huge sound of earth and stone breaking. Liang Yue dodged backward again. This time, he tapped his feet lightly and leaped backward more than 10 meters. The abomination on the opposite side seemed to have anticipated this fellow's dodging behavior, so, in the instant after landing and swinging its fist, it used the cover of the burst of dust and gravel to gather its strength again and forcefully push forward with its legs. Then, this time it used too much force and jumped a little too high. You really don't learn from your mistakes. Looking at the yellow figure on the opposite side that was now swooshing out of the flying dust, leaping 7 or 8 meters into the air, and then pouncing towards him, Liang Yue shook his head helplessly, and the thing in his hand suddenly clenched tightly with a tap of his feet. The whole person instantly disappeared from the spot. Chirp! The next moment, 2 dazzling sword lights bloomed vertically, turning into 2 wide moon arcs, accurately passing through the abomination's lower body. With a sizzle sound, the groin that had just healed a little was now severely injured again, under the double blow. The abomination's original stretched body, which was making a forward pouncing motion, curled up into a shrimp and slammed heavily on the ground from midair. However, Liang Yue didn't plan to hold back this time, because this fellow had now clearly discovered that this yellow man, whose IQ was completely offline, had no combat talent at all, and although he seemed to have destructive power, he was almost entirely acting on instinct. Perhaps the abomination's body was very strong, and its whole body was full of strength, but if it couldn't be used, it would all be in vain. Swish! In an instant, after Liang Yue once again crossed paths with the abomination from below, this fellow immediately stopped in the air in an instant. Rolling internal force was injected into his legs, and the one reed crossing the river's mid-air movement ability was instantly activated. Liang Yue then leaped towards his upper rear at a faster speed than before, leaving only a string of blurred phantoms in the air where he passed in the blink of an eye. He had reached a higher position than the abomination, which was flying forward looking down at the big fellow below, who was already unconsciously hunching his body under the drive of pain in his vital parts. Liang Yue narrowed his eyes slightly, and a cold light shot out from his eyes holding the double swords in reverse. Under this fellow's unsparing output of internal force, the mid-air movement ability continued to activate. Swish! At this time, Liang Yue was like a falling meteor, fleeting. Where the blade passed, it was as bright as starlight, and before the air could react, the double swords had already stabbed straight down towards the abomination's solid lower back. With a poof sound, the long blade pierced straight in from the opponent's raised muscle bumps, and then penetrated this big fellow's pair of kidneys. Under the blow of such kidney and groin double injuries, the abomination no longer had the ferocity it had before, and even the wailing in its mouth began to become weak. Liang Yue's attack was undoubtedly very insidious. With a simultaneous attack of the double swords, he directly cut off the opponent's source of power. Well, what is said here is actually not the kidneys. However, the kidneys are naturally also very important to people. The position that Liang Yue's double swords found was actually the human body's belt meridian located in the abomination's waist, as well as the node position of a tangled piece of tendons and flesh around the waist ribs. As an ancient martial arts inheritor, it can be said that no one in this world understands the importance of the waist ribs more than Liang Yue. Even some professionals who study anatomy are not as good. Those belt meridians and muscles that he cut off are actually the core hub connecting the human body's dragon bone vertebra, the upper and lower bodies, and the surrounding power transmission belts. Once broken or damaged, at least half of the human body's strength will disappear. This is not an exaggeration. Just look at the abomination's current appearance of being hopeless in life. After the core of the muscles was broken, his super strong muscles instantly became decorations. His whole body could not use any strength at all, and he could only lie there and wail weakly. Two standard long swords had already penetrated directly from the opponent's waist, nailing him to the ground. While Liang Yue had already taken out his dragon-slaying greatsword from the storage space, after experiencing the baptism of hundreds of thousands of orc armies in the Hobbit world, this heavy greatsword is now full of mottled marks. The deep blood stains cannot be soaked out even if they are soaked in infinite water sources to some extent. This sword is now covered with blood and dead souls, and is full of ferocity and sin. Perhaps it won't be long before it will give birth to a trace of spirituality, and along with Liang Yue's achievements in sweeping the orcs and the Dark Lord Soren, it is also fully qualified to be given a special name like Orcbiter and Foebiter. However, Liang Yue has not yet thought of a suitable code name to name it. Look at how you are living now, neither high nor low, not even worthy of being called a human. Before you die, do you have any last words? Liang Yue said, gently waving the dragon-slaying sword in his hand, and the huge sword body brought up a whirring wind sound in the air, and then accurately landed on the abomination's neck skin. Hearing this, the abomination just gritted his teeth, turned his head and stared at him fiercely, but said nothing. However, the abomination's silence at this time does not mean that others have nothing to say. Crack, 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 crack. Accompanied by the sound of a helicopter circling and landing, an elderly soldier in military uniform jumped out of the cabin and quickly ran towards this side. While running, he also shouted at him from a distance with a serious face, "You can't kill it. That's the property of the US military." Hearing this, Liang Yue didn't even lift his eyelids. He just stared at the abomination under his feet, holding the dragon-slaying sword high with both hands. After a few breaths, not getting a response from the other party, he then slashed down hard with the blade in his hand. Tseng, accompanied by a burst of jerky friction, the wide blade slashed through the opponent's neck. Afterwards, the entire blade was directly cut into the ground. No, a painful cry suddenly came from the mouth of the elderly general who was running towards him. According to the development of the plot, Liang Yue knew that this person should be the famous General Ross, who abandoned his daughter in order to cultivate super soldiers and capture the Hulk. It can be said that this old man has spent his entire life on the plan to cultivate super soldiers for the military. He is a very stubborn and tough representative of the Hawk faction. Seeing his hard work being directly beheaded by someone, General Ross immediately knelt on the ground with a painful face for a time. He was in tears and kept yelling at him loudly. Unfortunately, Liang Yue didn't care about these things at all. He gently kicked the abomination's head, and the opponent's head rolled aside. Large patches of yellow blood began to emerge from the opponent's body. Liang Yue then put away the dragon-slaying great sword in his hand and threw it back into the storage space. Then, stepping on the opponent's thick back, he forcefully pulled out the two kidney-stabbing long swords. After gently flicking off the bloodstains remaining on the blade, he looked up at Ross on the opposite side, as well as Dr. Banner, who was planning to escape from the plane. Finally, he still focused his attention on General Ross's daughter, Dr. Banner's girlfriend, Betty Ross. There's no way. Who made this female doctor look so much like Arwen? However, Liang Yue only glanced at the other party before putting away the double swords, and then tapped his feet and instantly left the scene. Chapter 192 Copy of Grand Forest. When he returned to the restaurant, Elizabeth and the others were still waiting there. However, after witnessing Liang Yue's performance in slaying the abomination, their gazes towards him had begun to change, especially those bodyguards who were usually responsible for protecting Elizabeth. Perhaps they originally thought that being favored by their blonde young lady was a stroke of good luck for this Chinese boy, but that was just being a little good-looking, a little cultured, and knowing a little Chinese martial arts, but that was all. Perhaps this would be a good match for ordinary girls, but for their young lady, it was clearly not enough. Only those who possessed extraordinary performances and qualities like today would be qualified to stand with Elizabeth. So now, Liang Yue had finally gained their approval. Of course, in the hearts of these bodyguards and royal guards, there was one thing that they couldn't understand even more. That was, why did their noble lady take the initiative to approach Liang Yue in the first place, and even seemed to be throwing herself at him? Look, this pretty boy had just returned, and their lady was already kissing him again. Immediately, the surrounding bodyguards and guards turned their heads away, feeling embarrassed. It's getting late, you should go back now. Such a thing happened here. If you go back too late, your aunt will worry. Yet, you just now seemed a little off. We could have left directly. Of course, I'm not saying that what you did to kill that monster was wrong. Well, you can think of me as suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Is there something wrong with your mentality? If so, I can introduce you to No Need. I've already found a solution, and I'll be fine after a while. Oh, okay then. After parting with Elizabeth, Liang Yue quickly returned home after this brief but not intense battle with the abomination. His state of mind had become much smoother, and when this guy had finished dealing with his affairs in the real world and arrived at the base world, teacher Shizuka, Alwyn, and the others were already ready and eager at this time. Each of them was wearing metal armor synthesized from the 49 grid toolbox, holding swords and shields, or spears. Even the giant eagle Rachel, after the joint efforts and attempts of the women, had been made an eagle version of the windproof helmet, as well as a chainmail breastplate. Only Alwyn, due to long-standing habits, had chosen a delicate leather armor made of +4 toolboxes, lined with dark purple silk, and held her usual elven longbow. Why are you so late today? Come here quickly. Where to go? Of course, to the next dungeon. This morning, that is, early yesterday in the base world, this guy had already placed the dungeon door in a spacious underground space within the village. After a period of expectant random selection, the first dungeon Liang Yue got his hands on turned out to be the entry-level leveling area from the DNF world, Elven Forest. Elven Forest is not just a single dungeon entrance, but contains an entire series: Gloomy Jungle, Depths of the Gloomy Jungle, Thunder Ruins, Poisonous Thunder Ruins, Gracker, Blazing Gracker. In addition, it also contains 2 hidden dungeon maps, Frost Gloomy Jungle and Dark Thunder Ruins, a full 8 maps to choose from. In addition, the system's background introduction about this Elven Forest dungeon also seems very simple and full of desire for exploration. Elven Forest, in the Elven language, it means flowing forest. It was once the home of a small group of elves. According to people who have accidentally entered this area, this forest is full of flowers and plants, and is full of ancient treasures. After the Elven Forest fire incident, the elves here have all disappeared. Now this forest is ruled by a group of frantic animals, plants, and green-skinned goblins. However, it is a pity that due to the McWorld's upgrade mechanism, although experience points can be obtained after killing monsters, these experience points can only be used as consumables for the enchantment mechanism, and cannot allow the game character to make any substantial improvements according to the system's previous prompts. In the dungeon in front of you, This model will also be followed, that is to say, in this Elven Forest series of dungeons, Liang Yue and the others can obtain drops from the DNF system after killing monsters, and can also obtain many additional materials from the forest, but experience points can still only be used as consumables for enchantment. This is really too regrettable. Arriving at the northernmost end of the village, this is an area adjacent to the hills and mountains and forests. Next to the village is cattle and sheep breeding area. When building the wall, Liang Yue also specifically considered the issue of environmental diversity, so he also enclosed a small mountain inside the wall for this reason. This guy also spent a lot of effort to dig stones. Fortunately, Liang Yue's actions were not just fiddling around blindly. This is not even the underground cave that was dug out when chiseling stones has now come in handy. The gate of this cave seems to have been expanded a lot again. Did you do it yesterday? Looking at this huge cave entrance, which is at least 20 meters high and 30 meters wide, standing in front of him, Liang Yue asked in surprise, and he also noticed that on the outside of this cave, there is now an outline of a large building. Vaguely, it seems to cover the entire cave entrance. It's just that it hasn't had time to be completed yet. Liang Yue's feeling is like when he was in the Hobbit world, under the leadership of Legolas and others, when he went to the cave settlement of the forest elves. The elegant stone gate built outside the mountain, of course. How can such an important place just use a shabby small mountain cave to enter and exit? And also, expanding it a little bit will make it easier for Rachel to pass through. Yet, yeah, not bad. I think so too, Gaga. I'd only believe you if I were a fool. It's true, but my idea is a bit different from your current stone gate hall style design. I originally planned to make a sinkhole-like round entrance, and then create a large waterfall next to it. Below is a deep pool, so that sunlight can directly shine in, and we can also plant some shade-loving plants and flowers around it. In the future, when we want to go to the dungeon, just jump down directly, and Rachel only needs to circle and fly down. Then why don't you do it? Isn't it just that there hasn't been time yet? In this way, chatting and joking with the little girls around him, everyone quickly followed this simple staircase down into the depths of the cave, about 50 or 60 meters underground. This is a deep cave round hall, with stone cones hanging down from the top of the cave. Even if the surroundings are already full of torches, the feeling is still that it cannot completely illuminate the place. An underground water vein is flowing gurglingly from the side of the round hall, and finally injected into the sea, or rather, it is connected to the sea in the underground passage. At this time, a huge stone arch door is sitting on the cave wall on one side of the round hall. The main body of the stone gate seems a bit dilapidated, full of ruins and cross sections, but it is still carved with simple patterns, and slender vines are wrapped around it. And at the front entrance of this stone arch, there is now a light film covering it like a ripple of water, and emitting a faint light through this light film. Everyone can vaguely see the shadowy scenery on the other side there. There seems to be a large forest, with tall trees, dilapidated stone sculpture ruins and flowers and plants all over the ground, and a group of green-skinned monsters walking around in the forest, etc. Chapter 193 Mirkwood. Let's double-check all your supplies, food, water, weapon provisions, and everything we already checked before you arrived. Liang Yujin. Oh, then let's split into groups now. We've already divided the groups too. Liang Yujin. According to our own analysis, you are definitely the strongest among us, followed by Alwyn, Rachel, Neri, Corey, and Zijiang. So our arrangement is that you, Liang Yujin, will lead a team alone, and the team members will be Saya, Yuriko Nichin, and me, who are relatively weaker. Report complete, please advise. Not bad. Looking at the girls in front of him, who were already eager to try and constantly moving their hands and feet, Liang Yue also suddenly felt that he was a little redundant. The Forest of Gent instance belongs to the DNF game world, so the rules for instances are basically the same as the game mode. For example, each instance can only have a maximum of 4 people in a group. For example, each instance is divided into 3 levels of difficulty: normal, warrior, and king. In addition, the system here seems to have also customized a set of anti-addiction mechanisms for them. That is, each person can only enter the instance a maximum of 5 times a day. Of course, the real world instances are definitely different from the game, but the specific differences will have to be seen in the instance itself. Okay, since you are all prepared, then I won't talk nonsense. Now we will enter the instance, but we still need to pay attention. When you first enter, you can only choose the normal mode of the lowest level instance. Don't choose anything else. What we need now is just to adapt to the environment inside. As he spoke, Liang Yue glanced at the girls in front of him, and then with a thought, he put on the set of armor that he had just taken off not long ago. Again now, Dark Forest, normal difficulty, let's go. After waving his hand at the crowd, This guy turned around and stepped into the water like portal. First, a moment he stepped in, a light curtain suddenly appeared in front of Liang Yue and the others, with 8 rectangular picture frames of instances arranged on its syngus. Liang Yue could only shrug his shoulders helplessly, and then gently clicked on the only lit picture on the light curtain in front of him, which had the face of a fierce minotaur on its swish. In an instant, everyone suddenly felt a whirl of heaven and earth, and their vision blurred. It was as if an invisible vortex was opening its big mouth in the space in front, quickly sucking everyone in. Afterwards, Liang Yue only felt a darkness in front of his eyes, but only for a moment. His eyes suddenly lit up, and he had already arrived in an unfamiliar place. This was an exceptionally secluded forest, with unknown birds chirping all around. The trees here were exceptionally tall and straight, very similar to the dark forest in the Hobbit world. Liang Yue looked up and saw that, with his eyesight, it was difficult to see the very top, where the branches and canopy were very lush, and the sunlight could not shine in. However, precisely because of this situation, the environment on the ground was clear at a glance. Apart from a shallow patch of short grass, and a few scattered rocks protruding from the ground, even a shrub was hard to find. The air was filled with the fragrance of natural trees, which smelled very comfortable. Continuing forward in the direction he was facing, not far in front of him, an iron archway covered in rust was located there. The interior of the archway was hollowed out, and many complex and obscure runes were engraved on it. A faint blue halo was lighting up these runes. According to the logic of the game, this door should be passable now. This mode is a little bit formal. As he spoke, Liang Yue curled his lips and then stretched out his arms, taking a deep breath. The internal energy that was originally quietly gathered in the dungeon suddenly began to become active and restless. Just the introduction of a breath caused the internal energy that Liang Yue originally controlled as easily as his arms to produce a change if he hadn't been suppressing it all the time. I'm afraid his internal energy would have started to circulate on its own. It seems that the energy activity here is very high, much higher than the Hobbit world. But that's right, our Rod continent is originally a magical land with various systematic magic, divine arts, combat skills, martial arts, and even apostles from the demon world. How can the energy activity here not be high to support these magical existences? Thinking of this, Liang Yue's heart was filled with excitement. At the same time, he secretly thought in his mind that it seems that he should spend more time in the instance in the future. Even if he doesn't go to fight monsters and level up, just cultivating here is definitely a good place. After pondering for a while, he turned his head to look at the 3 girls behind him, who were now all equipped. Teacher Shizuka was holding a large metal shield in her hand, wearing her rabbit reconnaissance hat, and also carrying a standard long sword at her waist. However, for this silly and cute school doctor, that sword should only be an ornament, and the shield in her hand is her main body. In comparison, the mother and daughter of the Takagi family appeared much more heroic. At this moment, one was holding a katana, and the other was drawing a bow and aiming an arrow. After living and cultivating in the stronghold world for a period of time, the figures and physiques of the two have almost become completely consistent. The full coverage helmets covered the beautiful faces of the two, but through a section of the sight groove in front of the eyes, Liang Yue could still easily identify their identities through their eyes. At this moment, Liang Yue could also see that the mother and daughter seemed a little nervous. Now don't be afraid, I'm here, let's go. As he spoke, Liang Yue turned his sleeves over, and 2 long swords were immediately held in his hands. Then, he led the 3 women forward unhurriedly, stepping through the iron archway. What appeared in front of them was a grassy and stony beach. The ground was slightly undulating, but it did not affect movement. Surrounded by several large rocks, a semicircular wooden shed was located there, and 7 or 8 green-skinned goblins were walking around there. Gaga. Liang Yue and the others had just appeared on the map, and they were instantly noticed by them. After one of the goblins screamed, the entire tribe of the small tribe picked up their wolf-tooth clubs and semicircular machetes, bared their teeth, and rushed towards them. However, after all, this is just the lowest level instance under normal difficulty, and it is only aimed at novices with levels 1 to 3. Therefore, although the momentum looks good, this group of goblins actually looks very weak, very thin, and very downcast. Although they are running, the speed is definitely not fast. Moreover, besides the rags around their waists, the only equipment on their bodies is the weapons in their hands. I'll leave them to you. After looking at this group of little guys, Liang Yue immediately rolled his eyes, sighed softly, and then turned to the 3 girls beside him and said swish. Almost at the moment when his voice fell, Saya Takagi, who was originally a little nervous, suddenly loosened the bowstring in her hand, and the arrow instantly shot out like a gray shadow, and then it missed. An originally well-made arrow rain was nailed to a stone on the side of the road. 5 or 6 meters away from the nearest green-skinned goblin. "Don't be nervous, Saya. I'm here." Seeing this, Liang Yue immediately comforted her. "Saya, just like when you usually shoot zombies, didn't you once shoot against a skeleton archer and win?" As a mother, Yuriko also glanced at her daughter at this time, and then walked forward with a katana in her hand. Chapter 194 Minotaur. Since arriving in the base world, Yuriko Takashiro has been working very hard. Besides taking care of everyone and managing the village, she also often asks Takikobir Tsujima for guidance in the art of Japanese swordsmanship. Now, after more than half a year of perseverance, coupled with the support of an authentic Taoist cultivation method like the primordial energy skill, this ant's combat power is also increasing day by day. Usually, when teaming up with others to explore and go down into the mines, she always takes on the role of vanguard. With her and Miss Zixu working together, they are enough to ensure the safety of the team behind them. In comparison, Teacher Shizuka has a different style. Despite having experienced the apocalypse, this school nurse still retains her cute and foolish demeanor, and her brain sometimes short-circuits. Therefore, she can't do difficult things. Asking her to go to the front lines with knives and swords to face zombies, skeleton archers, and other monsters is beyond her capabilities. However, fortunately, Teacher Shizuka has always been aware of her limitations and doesn't run to the front lines to cause trouble. Understanding that she is not suited for combat, since she started teaming up with others for exploration, this older sister picked up a shield and consciously took on the work of defense and support. As a result, after a period of time, Teacher Shizuka has stubbornly honed a good set of defensive skills through her persistence, dedication, and long-term cooperation with others in the team. At this moment, when Teacher Shizuka saw Yuriko step forward with her sword, she subconsciously followed, holding up her shield. After a few small steps, she arrived at Yuriko's side and slightly in front, next to a large rock. She planted the shield on the ground and then used her strength to block in front of the group of short, ugly, green-skinned goblins. No matter how the goblins in front used their weapons to clang and bang, she persisted in not retreating. Feeling that the time was right, Teacher Shizuka actually began to inject the internal energy within her body into the shield in front of her, and then rushed forward forcefully, ramming forward with all her might. With the eruption of internal energy, she directly knocked the goblins over, sending them rolling backward. Yuriko, on the other hand, took advantage of this opportunity, holding her katana and attacking from the other side. Slashing fiercely at the goblins. Swish swish, 2 slashes were enough to take down a goblin. Relying on her decent footwork, Yuriko quickly moved around the goblins, while continuously slashing with her katana. Upward slash, horizontal sweep, thrust, retreat, slash again, sweep again. The frequency of attacks could reach about 3 slashes per second. When the goblins began to rise from the ground and swarm up again, shouting, Yuriko did not engage them head-on, but retreated while fighting. When she retreated behind Teacher Shizuka's shield again, there were only 3 goblins left in front of her at this time. Teacher Shizuka secretly peeked out, took a look forward, and then raised her shield again. Stomping her feet and pushing forward fiercely, bang. This time, she didn't use internal energy for the impact, but the goblins that rushed up in front were still knocked to the ground. Seeing this, Yuriko naturally wouldn't miss the opportunity, and once again raised her sword and stepped forward, slashing the 3 goblins to the ground in a few moves, so they could no longer get up. Seeing that all the enemies were eliminated, Teacher Shizuka finally straightened up from behind the shield with a relaxed expression, touched the non-existent sweat on her forehead, and then turned to give Liang Yue a sweet smile. Then seeking praise, "Not yet. See that wooden shed? That's the goblin's nest. A goblin will spawn every once in a while. Go over and smash it." Looking at a goblin that was emerging from the wooden shed in the distance, Liang Yue smiled and reminded the two. Oh, subsequently, with the combined efforts of Yuriko and Teacher Shizuka, the goblin's nest was quickly smashed into a pile of broken wood. The two then began to collect the spoils left behind by the dead green-skinned goblins on the ground. "How about it? Do you want me to change a weapon for you, a crossbow or a firearm or something?" Looking at Saya Takashiro, who was a little unhappy beside him, Liang Yue came to her side to comfort her. "No need. My archery's very good. I was just a little nervous just now." HMPH, if Liang Yue remembers correctly, these strawberries and magic flowers are the lowest level supplies in DNF, one replenishing a small amount of health, and the other replenishing a small amount of magic. Is the first map of the lowest level novice copy. This harvest is already quite good. After finishing, everyone sorted out their mood and continued to pass through the archway that lit up in front, heading towards the next map. The ground environment inside the second door was still a grassland, but the terrain was more complicated. Here, rocks were everywhere, There were 2 goblin wooden sheds, and 8 green-skinned goblins were distributed in various locations on the grassland. Sayataka was very active at this time. Almost immediately after entering the door, she immediately took action, jumping lightly, and the whole person climbed to the top of a large rock in front. Obviously, this little girl was stimulated in front, and now she is eager to show herself. However, Liang Yue did not stop her from this rash behavior, because in the dark dense forest copy in front of her, the green-skinned goblins were all melee creatures. Even if she completely exposed herself, there would not be much danger, and after occupying the commanding heights, Sayataka, this archer, will also maximize her roll. Swish 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 ga. After calming down, Sayataka finally began to exert her skills. Although the hit rate still cannot reach 100%, basically 3 arrows can hit 2 arrows with the cooperation of her mother Yuriko and teacher Shizuka below. A small group of green-skinned monsters quickly fell to the ground after knocking down the 2 goblin nests and scouring the spoils. Everyone continued to move towards the next level in this way. With the mutual cooperation of the 3 women, they steadily advanced all the way, while Liang Yue was just making soy sauce the whole time, sitting aside to watch the fun, and occasionally giving a few pointers until the last level of this dark dense forest, which is the legendary boss room. This is a grassland with almost no undulation. The entire area has no rocks. It is a wide grassland like a football field. A group of a dozen green-skinned goblins are surrounding a minotaur more than 2 meters tall. In addition, a treasure chest is placed at the end of the map. Chapter 195 Magical Windmill. The minotaur species generally only has one attack method, which is to charge straight ahead and ram with their horns. In reality, as long as you dodge well and make sure you're not in a straight line with it, you'll be fine. Right now, your main focus should still be on those goblins around it. Try to dodge the minotaur's charge while taking care of those goblins. Looking at the other end of the map, at the group of green-skinned goblins already screaming and running towards them, Liang Yue then turned his gaze to teacher Shizuka. Especially you, Shizuka, when facing this kind of large, charging monster, you can't just keep holding your shield and crouching. That will only make you a target, eh? Oh yeah, but what should I do then? Teacher Shizuka was stunned for a moment upon hearing this, and then a few traces of fear appeared on her cute face. Subconsciously looking around, she found that the entire map was flat and open, without any cover. Immediately, she turned her gaze to Liang Yue. With a look of help on her face, Gao Chengsaya rolled her eyes at this time, reminding her, unable to watch any longer. Teacher Shizuka, you can stack stone blocks on the ground. Isn't that what we are good at? If that doesn't work, you can also dig a trap tunnel. Hearing this, the blunt school doctor suddenly realized, and slapped her palm hard, then praised the pink-haired girl next to her. That's right. Little Saya-chan, you're so smart. After speaking, teacher Shizuka immediately picked up her shield with great enthusiasm, and then waved her hand at the open space in front of her. In an instant, a stone wall 1 meter 80 in length and width, and 90 centimeters thick, appeared in front of everyone. After finishing, this cute school doctor still felt it wasn't safe enough, so she hid behind her shield again, and ran diagonally forward while bending over. Then next then again. A moment later, when the goblins on the opposite side arrived in groups in front of Liang Yue and the others, teacher Shizuka had already laid down a rocky maze composed of more than a dozen stone walls in their surrounding area. Immediately afterwards, this sister held up her shield, squatted down behind the only gap left open in front of the stone wall formation, and then turned back to wave at them, signaling I'm hidden. Let's begin. Everyone was dumbfounded watching this happen, and just like that, with teacher Shizuka's assist, the Gao Cheng mother and daughter easily used the convenience of the rocky maze to eliminate a dozen or so goblins here. When it came time to deal with the minotaur boss, Liang Yue personally took action. Facing the minotaur's charge, he simply sidestepped and attacked its legs with this one sword strike. He easily shaved off most of the minotaur's health bar. About 5 minutes later, with a flash of light, Liang Yue and the other 3 were teleported outside the dungeon gate. The other elite team, Alwyn, Minami Rika, Dakashimazi, and the giant eagle Rachel, were already waiting there. Seeing them appear, they quickly offered greetings and inquired about it and exchanged their experiences with the dungeon. Afterwards, the 2 groups even took out the spoils they had gained this time and placed them on the ground for comparison and discussion. Wow, you guys even got such a big gem. It's almost as big as my palm. It's called aquamarine. It sounds very powerful. It should be a valuable alchemy material. Right, Liang Yue-kun? No, it's just a gem. In the original world of this dungeon, its decorative meaning is greater than its practicality. but maybe you can find a use for it in other worlds. What about this? This katana looks very unique. This is a magic weapon, and it's also a legendary purple equipment sugoi. What are its stats and attack power? In terms of attack power, it's a bit worse than the weapons we synthesized from the 49 grid toolbox, but it adds 3% attack speed and has 2 strength attributes. Wow! Which monster did you get it from? The Minotaur boss. We found it in the last treasure chest. What is this plant? Can it be used? Rami leaf. It was dropped from those green-skinned goblins. The effect is similar to your purple flower ball. This coin can't be used casually. Oh? Is this thing very powerful? Half gold and half silver. It looks so special. Are we going to continue now? After a moment, looking at the girls in front of him who had begun to calm down, Liang Yue then asked them. The answer he received was a unanimous nod of confirmation from everyone. Then which difficulty should we play now? We've already cleared the normal level. Should we try the warrior level Dark Dense Forest? Of course we have to try the warrior level. I haven't even shown much of my combat power before. Minami Rika, holding the infinite ammo penetrator pistol snatched from someone's hand, twirled it flamboyantly on her fingers, and said with her chin raised, the difficulty of the normal dungeon is indeed a bit low. Alwyn also nodded in agreement. Those green-skinned goblins are indeed not enough to cut down. The final Minotaur boss is also not very interesting, just charging back and forth in a straight line, sometimes even tripping over itself. The warrior level dungeon will definitely drop more good things, right, Gaga? Agree to go to higher difficulty. Okay. It seems you've already decided. Listening to the chattering voices of the crowd, Liang Yue then waved his hand. Then let's go. This time's target, Dark Dense Forest warrior level, saying that, this guy led his group towards the dungeon gate again. Windmill, from the Forager world. After system modification, all permission items have been unlocked, and can be used to make various plant seeds, seedlings, flour, sugar, mayonnaise, cheese, tofu, vermicelli, noodles and other processed products. Price 1,000 points. In the blink of an eye, 2 days passed quickly. The people in the stronghold world were still immersed in the dungeon world, unable to extricate themselves, especially those women and giant eagles. In the time when Liang Yue was no longer there, they would also integrate and group themselves, constantly challenging new difficulties. After everyone's unremitting efforts, the dungeon map in Grand Forest has also been expanded to the 3rd chapter, which is the Thunderous Ruins dungeon. However, this process was very difficult, especially the cat monsters in the depths of the Dark Dense Forest, which caused them a lot of trouble, being abused to the point of near death. Although in the end, these two groups of people still managed to take down the cat monster boss of the king difficulty by various clever means. But afterwards, after an in-depth discussion, the girls all agreed that the dungeon map in the depths of the Dark Dense Forest still had a lot of potential to be tapped. Those swift and elusive cat monsters were not just a pile of experience for them, but also objects to obtain equipment from. Using them to hone their martial arts skills and combat awareness is the best choice. Therefore, even though they had already lit up the higher level map of Thunderous Ruins, senior sisters E and Alwyn chose to stop temporarily. Instead, they began to team up freely, and the only 5 dungeon opportunities each day were spent immersed in the depths of the Dark Dense Forest, accompanied by the cat monsters in the map, constantly improving their cultivation level through this practical method. In comparison, Liang Yue seemed much more casual, except for the first day when he took teacher Shizuka and the Gaocheng mother and daughter to the dungeon 5 times. In the following 2 days, he was completely isolated from the girls and the little female eagle. Helpless, this guy had to embark on a journey of cultivation alone, fighting lonely in one dungeon map after another. However, in this way, Liang Yue's speed of lighting up and developing new dungeons was undoubtedly much faster. Currently, he has also opened the 4th dungeon without any surprise, Venomous Thunderous Ruins, and easily defeated the poison attribute cat monster king of the normal difficulty. Chapter 196 Suit and Tie. It was the weekend. Liang Yue had just finished hosting a bunch of freeloading classmates, including Elizabeth, for a lavish dinner at his home. After seeing them off one by one, Liang Yue slipped into the stronghold world. Elizabeth, the blonde girl, was now somewhat aware of her position as the lady of the house. When entertaining guests like Sam, Holland, Gwen Stacy, and Liang Yue's little Japanese classmate, she consciously helped serve tea and water and assisted with cooking when it was time to leave. The girl also helped him clean up the dishes before being the last to depart. The only pity was that she didn't intend to stay overnight, so, although this blonde girl is seen by other classmates as Liang Yue's official girlfriend, their actual relationship is still in the trainee stage. With a flash of light, Liang Yue arrived inside the stronghold world. However, the place where he appeared this time was not the village where the women were. but a swampy area shrouded in a faint mist. The ground was soft, and occasionally, splashes of water would bubble up when stepped on. Ponds dotted the surroundings, and the air carried a faint, oily, fermented smell. A dead sheep was lying on the shore, its fur tattered, revealing its white bones. Countless maggots were wriggling in its remaining carcass, surrounded by swarms of flamboyant flies. In addition, the croaking of unknown frogs constantly echoed around, soon forming a chorus. Listening to it, Liang Yue felt a little noisy, but he could barely accept it. The reason why he would stay away from home and the company of the women, coming to this desolate wilderness, was actually for seclusion. That's right, he came here for seclusion. To be precise, he came alone to cultivate his superpower, hair manipulation. The cause of this matter has to be traced back to last night. Although Liang Yue had already used Smog's dragon bloodline power to cultivate Hunyuan Gong to the top level, he still maintained the good habit of practicing at night. It's just that the cultivation method he practiced had changed from Hunyuan Gong to Dazu Fist. As a result, when he was cultivating in the evening to a certain stage, somehow, a mosquito floated to the roof of the library. Seeing Liang Yue covered in sweat, it circled him twice and finally landed on his calf. Liang Yue had already keenly noticed the mosquito's figure, but he was at a critical moment of cultivation. He needed to maintain a levitating state. With his hands firmly gripping an iron bar, he really couldn't spare any extra hands or feet to sweat this little bitch who was about to suck his blood. Just as he was troubled and worried about this, an idea suddenly flashed in his mind. Then, he silently activated his superpower. After a few breaths, he used the black hair on his calf to strangle the mosquito to death. He tied up the mosquito with the hair on his calf, and then, with a tug in the opposite direction, he strangled the mosquito to death. Hair manipulation could also be used to prevent mosquitoes. This was something Liang Yue had never thought of before. Of course, that's not the point. The real point was that, afterwards, when he checked the superpower panel, he was surprised to find that his accidental act of strangling a mosquito with his hair had brought him more than 30 superpower proficiency points at once. At this moment, Liang Yue's thoughts also became active. According to the system's description, the superpower system is actually different from other abilities on his body, such as cultivation methods, skills, and so on. Even the initial proficiency of a superpower level is as high as 1,000 points. That's 10 times more than the first level proficiency of a skill or cultivation method. In this case, although Liang Yue looked down on the hair manipulation ability he had drawn, he couldn't help but pay attention to it in the face of the real data comparison. So, after this discovery, he began to turn his mind. As a result, the next morning, which was this morning, Liang Yue had Rachel send him to such a swampy area in front of him. He didn't even go to the dungeon, for nothing else. Just to quickly train his superpower. As for the reason for choosing the swamp terrain, it was very simple. According to Liang Yue's observation, although there was a lot of water and ponds in the swamp, most of them were stagnant puddles. In this environment, it was most suitable for breeding all kinds of mosquitoes and flies. The surrounding frog sounds could be connected, which also indirectly indicated that frogs could find more food here. Well, but just standing here won't work. After all, it's in the wild. What if a few zombies or skeleton monsters spawn at that time? It would be quite dangerous if I were too absorbed in cultivation. Thinking of this, Liang Yue immediately looked around and quickly selected a flat area near the pond. Then, he used stone blocks to build a simple waterfront pavilion for himself. The 4 pillars were more than 2 meters high, and the main body of the building was above the pillars. The walls of the pavilion were only built about 1 meter high, but it was enough to block the invasion of zombies and skeleton archers. Then, torches were inserted around the perimeter. Soon, various buzzing and whining sounds of mosquitoes and flies rang out in the room where Liang Yue was. Seeing this, he didn't waste any time. After looking around to make sure there were no omissions, he directly took off his clothes and stood naked in the center of the pavilion, silently concentrating on cultivation. The next day, around 10 o'clock in the morning, the tailor shop called, saying that one of the suits he had ordered was completed. So Liang Yue immediately drove all the way, and then, about half an hour later, he returned home. After this trip, the clothes on this guy's body had been changed from the comfortable casual dress he had worn when he left to a set of rigorous and decent black handmade suits, with a white shirt as the lining. It was just an ordinary black and white combination, without any extra embellishments. But under the tailoring, it completely fit Liang Yue's figure and size. Standing in front of the mirror, his entire temperament was completely highlighted. There's no need to say more about the workmanship. After all, Elizabeth led him to a high-end store. If there were any mistakes in it, the store would be smashing its own brand. Speaking of which, shouldn't I introduce an electrical system into my stronghold world sooner? Although the village doesn't lack light due to the torches, and the climate and temperature are very comfortable, the library also has a lot of books to read, martial arts to practice, and recently I can go to a dungeon with a team again, but Shizuka and Yuriko are, after all, people from modern society staying in such a village without an electrical system for a long time. I'm afraid they will also feel bored, right? Liang Yue, who was standing in front of the mirror tidying himself up, suddenly had this idea in his mind when he thought of the party he was going to attend tonight. Immediately, this guy took out a wooden gift box from the drawer next to him. Opening the box, a delicate watch appeared there. This was exactly the gift that the blonde girl, Elizabeth, had bought for him when Liang Yue and Elizabeth went on their first date. This guy remembered that it had cost more than $300,000 at the time. He really didn't know why a watch that was obviously only used for timing would sell so expensively. In such an occasion tonight, I still have to put on the act that I should. Those jewelry and the like seem a bit ostentatious when worn, and a watch seems a little more low-key. Thinking of this, Liang Yue put the watch on his left wrist, and tidied up his sleeves, hiding the brilliance of the jewelry inside his cuffs. Ding dong. At this moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Hearing this sound, Liang Yue raised his eyebrows, thinking, besides my classmates, do I have guests at home? With doubts in his heart, he quickly walked over and took a look. After opening the door, "Hi Carlson, what's up?" "Yes, there's indeed something." "With us, get up, are you going out?" "If it's inconvenient it's okay, come in, I just have a party tonight, and I have plenty of time now, thank you." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197, Tony Stark. Night. Under the dazzling neon lights of New York City, Liang Yue arrived at the Stark Group building in Manhattan. The time now was just past 6 o'clock, and the party was officially scheduled to start at 6 o'clock and end at 9:30. Originally, Liang Yue thought that as an important figure, he should arrive later than others, so that he could enjoy the attention of thousands of eyes. When he entered under the spotlight and the worship of all beings, he would display his elegant and composed demeanor. Liang Yue thought so in his heart, and he originally planned to do so. After repeated deliberation, this guy found that arriving at 7 o'clock should be a good time. Unfortunately, the idea was good, but the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. Just before 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Aunt Liu had already driven her red sports car to his door. Whether from her demeanor or appearance, she appeared elegant and composed, beautiful and moving, attracting much attention. When Aunt Liu received Liang Yue's call and learned that he had actually obtained an invitation to the Stark Group's opening party, she was extremely surprised, because even she, a successful person who had been in North America for many years, didn't seem to have received an invitation from the Stark Group, the leader in the world's military industry. However, when Aunt Liu learned that Tony Stark was a fan of his book and was somewhat dissatisfied with the treatment of the Stark family in the novel A Song of Ice and Fire, and wanted to discuss the issue of plot modification with him in person, Aunt Liu wasn't surprised, and happily accepted his invitation. Undoubtedly, for a successful person like Aunt Liu, who is active in the business world, after asset management is on the right track, the importance of connections is already the top priority. Most of the people who can attend the Stark Group's relocation ceremony in New York are undoubtedly in powerful social strata. Simply being rich will definitely not get you an invitation, because no matter how rich you are still a younger brother in front of Tony Stark. Only those who are rich, influential, or powerful and influential are likely to get an invitation. Of course, for lucky people like Liang Yue who are purely lucky enough to be chosen, it is definitely unsolvable in the face of this logic. After handing the black invitation to the doorman and going through a set of security procedures, Liang Yue and Aunt Liu walked hand in hand towards the interior of the Stark Group. After entering, Tony Stark's personal assistant, Pepper Potts, was standing not far away, greeting them softly with a friendly smile and directing them. Liang Yue and Aunt Liu then followed a waiter's guidance to the party venue. Pushing open the door, dazzling lights, explosive music, and beautiful girls twisting and dancing on the main stage immediately rushed towards them. This atmosphere, it's like a nightclub. Looking at the colorful and festive venue environment, Liang Yue subconsciously scratched the back of his head and said speechlessly, "Everyone has different preferences. I heard that Mr. Stark is indeed a relatively casual person." As she said that, Aunt Liu turned around and adjusted his bow tie for Liang Yue. After seeing the strong muscles under his sexy collarbone, a deep smile suddenly appeared on her face, and she continued, "Not bad, It seems that although you haven't been in New York for long, you're having a great time. Relax." After saying that, Aunt Liu patted him on the shoulder, took a glass of champagne from the table next to her, and left alone, leaving Liang Yue alone in place, feeling a little at a loss. After all, this was the first time in both his past and present lives that he had attended such a party. Although this guy had also learned a lot about the descriptions and suggestions for this kind of occasion from various channels. For example, be elegant, be open, be able to chat with people, hold a glass of wine, don't eat and drink too much, etc. Unfortunately, after really coming to this kind of occasion, Liang Yue still felt a little uncomfortable. The essential attribute in this guy's heart is actually a homebody. Usually, besides going to school, he likes to stay in the stronghold world. There are 6 charming women there, and an eagle accompanies him. The reason why he wanted to attend the party this time was because he was a fan of Downey in his previous life, and he especially loved the other party's portrayal of Iron Man. Now he's here just to see the real person. Forget it, I'll just stay on the side to eat, drink, and watch the dance. At least the girls on the stage are all very beautiful. Afterwards, Liang Yue also took a glass of wine from the side, picked up a few pieces of fruit and put them on a plate, then chose a not too far, not too close position and sat directly in a wide, long sofa with his legs crossed. He began to concentrate on watching the song and dance performance on the stage. About half an hour later, Liang Yue suddenly remembered something, so he turned his head to look around. Didn't Elizabeth also say she was coming? Why haven't I seen her? Or is it that this little girl's appearance time hasn't arrived yet? He rolled up his sleeves and looked at the time on his watch, which showed 5 minutes to 7. Nice watch. At this moment, in the noisy venue, a voice suddenly came from Liang Yue's side. Looking up, the person who came was actually Downey. Well, no, it should be Tony Stark, and he was accompanied by his fat bodyguard Happy. "Hello, Mr. Stark." Liang Yue stood up at this time and shook hands with the other party with a smile. "Hello, Liang Yue, can I sit down?" After shaking his hand lightly, Stark smiled and pointed to the seat next to him. "Of course you look like you're a little uncomfortable." "Yes, I'm really not used to the environment here." "Oh right. You seem to be still in high school, but to be honest, I can't see any high school student in you, whether it's your appearance, temperament, or your writing." "Thank you. It seems you really are a fan of my book, Mr. Stark." This statement, let's skip it for now. "What about my previous suggestion? Have you considered it?" "I think my bodyguard, that is, the one next to me, he should have conveyed my suggestion to you when he sent the invitation over." "Oh, you mean, about modifying the plot?" "Yes, so what is your opinion?" "Sorry, Mr. Stark, actually I have already finished writing the novel A Song of Ice and Fire, and all the manuscripts have been handed over to the publishing house. It's too troublesome to modify, so I don't plan to touch it anymore." "Are you sure? Then how about I pay you to write it?" "Sorry, okay then let's change the way of cooperation. Your novel continues to be sold, and I buy your film and television adaptation rights. How about that? I plan to make it into a movie, and a TV series. However, when the time comes, how the plot is changed is up to me in that case. Of course there is no problem, after all, I wrote this novel to make money." "Okay. It's settled, then later, I will send someone to talk to you about a contract." After speaking, Tony Stark looked relaxed, raised his glass to him, and then got up to leave. "That actually, I also plan to do another business with you." Seeing this, Liang Yue hurriedly called out to the other party. To be honest, he was really not used to Tony Stark's behavior of turning his back on people after completing a transaction. "You plan to do business with me?" After hearing his words, Tony Stark's eyes immediately looked at him again, but this time, the business tycoon's face no longer had a smile, but a condescending look. In the condescending look, there was also a slight hint of pickiness. After staring at Liang Yue for about 2 seconds, this nouveau riche nodded expressionlessly, and then opened his mouth. "All right, kid, I'll give you a chance. From now on, you have 20 seconds to impress me." Chapter 198. All eyes on. Liang Yue chuckled softly upon hearing this, then reached out towards the seat opposite him and said, "Please, sit down." "I think you should hurry up," Tony Stark said after sitting down, taking a sip of the white wine in his hand. "The business I want to discuss is related to your health, Mr. Stark." Liang Yue looked at his businesslike, stingy face and chuckled inwardly, thinking that this Iron Man's personality was just like in the movies, not very likable. At this moment, Stark had already flipped open the watch under his cuff and started playing the countdown game with him. "Your time is running out, kid." 10, 9, 8. Happy, who was standing to the side, also dutifully walked over, placing a hand on his shoulder with a warning look, not forgetting his duty just because he had received a bottle of wine as a gift earlier. "Don't interrupt, Happy," Go to the side and keep an eye out. Don't let anyone get close. After saying that, Stark refocused his gaze on him, seemingly wanting to see something in Liang Yue's eyes, but ultimately failed. How did you know about this? I naturally have my channels, Mr. Stark. Judging by your complexion, you must already be suffering quite a bit from the arc reactor in your chest. I'm referring to heavy metal poison. And continue. I'm listening. I don't think you've had that bottle of wine I sent you through Happy last time, have you? Oh? You mean to say that your wine can remove the heavy metal toxins from my body, right? And then you'll definitely say that you added a lot of precious medicinal herbs inside and used a secret recipe from your Eastern world, which can definitely promote blood circulation, beautify the skin, and eliminate toxins, right? So are you here to sell me wine, Mr. Liang Yue? That bottle of wine does have all the effects you mentioned, but I'm not here to sell wine. The business I'm talking about is something even more thorough for you. Please continue. I know a very special metal formula. Its atomic structure is not found on Earth, nor does it exist on the periodic table. It can be used to perfectly replace the palladium element in your chest. However, it doesn't exist in this world yet. Someone needs to make it. I understand now. You mean you want me to fund your project, so you can create that metal you mentioned in the lab, the one that doesn't exist on the periodic table? Would the great Mr. Stark also like to provide you with some technical support? For example, in the field of miniature arc reactors. Seeing Tony Stark in front of him, who thought he had caught his little trick and continued to deduce along his line of thought, completely portraying Liang Yue as a project scammer seeking funds from him. Liang Yue then reached out and interrupted the other party's fantasy, then continued with a hint of teasing smile. You misunderstand, Mr. Stark. What I mean is, I'll give you the formula and design structure, and you'll manufacture the new element. Once you've created the thing, if it has an effect on your body, then you can give me the money. That's the deal I'm talking about. Of course, if you want to use this to do business, giving me a share of the profits would be even more appreciated. Let Liang Yue do the new element. Don't be ridiculous. He doesn't have that technology, nor that talent and need, or rather, this guy is not that type of person at all. This guy is just simply trying to earn some extra money now. After hearing his words, Tony Stark fell into deep thought, staring at the champagne in his hand, his expression changing several times. After a moment, he raised his head and looked at Liang Yue, raising his eyebrows. You seem very confident, kid. Of course, because what I said is true. Come with me. Let's find a quieter place to talk. Saying that, Stark sighed softly, then flicked his head at this guy, signaling him to follow. A moment later. What did you say? You mean you want to take an unknown formula with untested feasibility from Stark and get $100 million? It's payment afterwards, Mr. Stark. After you create that new element, you'll need to transfer $100 million to me. Of course, if you're not at ease, we can sign an agreement. However, I might need a little bit of the subsequent profit sharing. Don't even think about it, kid. I've never seen anyone like you, Tony Stark, trying to do business with me. Don't even think. Knock knock knock. Just at this time, in the quiet, soundproofed, demagnetized glass room, there was a sudden knock on the door. The two immediately turned their heads to look, and then the door was pushed open, and it turned out to be Tony Stark's personal assistant, Pepper Potts. Is there anything I can do for you, Miss Potts? We're in the middle of a business discussion. Being Stark's personal assistant, Pepper Potts obviously knew her employer's nature very well, so she directly stated the reason. While speaking, she still maintained a gentle and amiable smile on her face. Miss Stewart is here. I think you should go and greet her, Tony. As she spoke, Stark clapped his hands together, then turned his head and looked at Liang Yue with a look of disgust on his face. We'll talk about your business later, kid. Believe me, no one can get Stark's benefits for nothing. While saying that, this wealthy man was still accepting Miss Pepper Potts' tidying of the wrinkles on his clothes. After that, he strode out excitedly. Liang Yue naturally wouldn't be waiting here foolishly at this time, so he followed behind the other party, walking out unhurriedly. Aren't you waiting for him here? I mean, you guys seem to be talking about cooperation matters just now. Pepper Potts, who was walking beside him at this time, also reminded Liang Yue with a bit of a reminder. It's okay, I'm not in a hurry about business matters. I'm going to greet my girlfriend now. Girlfriend? After returning to the venue, Tony Stark had quickly walked towards the crowded crowd in front, reminding the people in front to quickly make way. All the way. After a while, he came to the forefront of the crowd. Liang Yue had already stood on the steps at this time, and saw Elizabeth's figure from a distance. At this time, she was wearing a moon-white evening dress, and her overall dress was very simple and elegant. Her golden hair was tied up high, and she was also wearing a pair of lotus hairpins that she had given her. Surrounded by the glamorous crowd around her, she still appeared extraordinarily eye-catching, like a noble lotus flower, making people see her uniqueness at a glance. I didn't expect you to come in person, respected Miss Stewart. The entire Stark group is deeply honored. Tony Stark seemed very gentlemanly and solemn at this time, straightening his waist, putting one hand behind his back, and showing Elizabeth a gentle smile. Then, he gently picked up the blonde girl's hand, bent down and gave a kiss of the hand. I'm very glad to receive your invitation, Mr. Stark. Your venue is arranged very unique. Elizabeth looked up and glanced at the crowd around her. After seeing Liang Yue's figure, a charming smile suddenly appeared on her face. Oh, I'm sorry, my venue was indeed arranged a little casually today. Well, why don't we change the style and change to a piece of classical music? Saying that, Tony Stark immediately winked at Happy behind him, waving his hand to tell him to hurry up and do it. No need, Mr. Stark. I came here today actually to find my boyfriend. He's at the venue now. Boyfriend? Upon hearing this, the smile on Stark's face suddenly stiffened, and a burst of frustration suddenly came from the crowd, especially those young single men at the scene, who originally wanted to come up and show their hospitality, and even fantasized about kissing Fangs and having a romantic encounter with Elizabeth. Now that this lady said this, she immediately shattered their thoughts. Who is it? Which lucky brat was able to get your favor? Stark pretended to be full of jealousy at this time, scanning the crowd with his eyes, and finally looked at Elizabeth herself. It's me at this time. Liang Yue's voice came from behind him at the right time. Then this guy separated the crowd, and then walked slowly towards the middle of the two people in full view from Tony Stark's hand. He took the slender jade hand that he had been holding in his palm, and then wiped the place that had just been kissed by the other party on the back of the blonde girl's hand on his chest. You look beautiful tonight, Elizabeth. Saying that, Liang Yue smiled lightly and reached out to stroke her golden hair, his fingers gently brushing over the hairpin on her head. And then a kiss was imprinted on that crystal clear lip, touching and separating. Then Liang Yue turned his head in Elizabeth's eyes full of smiles and tenderness, and looked at Tony Stark behind him invisibly. There was a bit of overlooking in this guy's expression now, and Stark, this wealthy man, was now with his neck stuck, looking at him with jealousy and disapproval. Seeing Liang Yue's expression at this time, Stark's brow jumped immediately, and then he said with a stinky face, kid, if I could be 20 years younger now, no 10 years, I would immediately slap you with a glove and start a life and death duel to rescue the beautiful princess from you. You have no chance, Mr. Stark. Chapter 199. The deal with the dog owner was concluded. After that, the party entered a lull due to Elizabeth's arrival and the appearance of Liang Yue, her boyfriend. Many people wanted to come and chat, and even the host, Tony Stark, was temporarily overshadowed. However, after reluctantly dealing with them for a while, Stark noticed that the blonde girl, like Liang Yue, didn't seem to enjoy socializing much, so he arranged a quiet room for them. Throughout this process, Liang Yue also subtly noticed that Aunt Liu seemed a bit melancholic about the existence of his girlfriend. Perhaps in her opinion, it wasn't a good thing for him to be with a blonde girl. I never knew you were so popular in the eyes of these people. Although he had already investigated Elizabeth's identity, Liang Yue still acted a bit surprised as he poured her a glass of ancient fruit wine. The guy then sat down beside the blonde girl, put an arm around her waist, clinked glasses with her, and said with a pretentious look, I'm just an ordinary high school student, but my family is a bit special, so my living conditions have been good since I was little. Consequently, others may look up to me because of my family, but in reality, I'm not that outstanding. What is this wine? It's the best wine I can currently brew. From the selection of ingredients to the production process, it's unique in this world, and others can't imitate it at all. This wine is indeed very special. Its brewing materials must be very rare, right, nourishing, purifying, detoxifying. This is the evaluation that a genuine old witch gave me after tasting it. Of course, I've already experienced its effects, but you haven't answered my question yet. The brewing materials are unique. No one in this world can get them except me. Then what if I want to drink it in the future? Then you come find me. I have plenty here. HMPH. Knock knock. Am I disturbing you? The door was knocked on and immediately opened, and then Tony Stark poked half of his body in, his eyes mischievously scanning the two of them, and then he said with a smile, no, Mr. Stark, actually we're the ones disturbing you. Elizabeth sat up from Liang Yue's arms without a trace and responded with a smile, don't say that, it's my honor to have you here. Really. You know, we Americans generally have a lot of respect and yearning for your old British aristocratic families. As he spoke, Tony Stark pushed the door open and then stood inside, letting Pepper Potts, who was pushing a dining cart behind him, in. This is the dinner I prepared for you. The time was a bit rushed, but the taste should still be good. I'm truly honored to receive Tony Stark's hospitality. Liang Yue then stood up, took a wine glass from the nearby cabinet, and then, under Elizabeth's watchful gaze, poured a glass of ancient fruit wine and handed it to the big shot. You should feel honored, kid, but I'm sorry to tell you, you're just a side effect. I'm mainly here to entertain. This doesn't seem like my wine. After subconsciously taking a sip of the wine someone handed him, Tony Stark's venomous tongue attribute was immediately stopped at this moment. He had a look of astonishment on his face. His eyes widened as he looked at the liquid in his hand. Unable to recover for a long time, the other hand was unconsciously stroking his chest, and his originally slightly dark complexion suddenly became rosy at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a long while, he suddenly woke up under Pepper Pot's concerned gaze, and then subconsciously exclaimed, "Wow, this feeling is amazing. My body just felt like it was being purified. Very comfortable. I haven't felt this way in a long time. For someone who has been poisoned, your feelings will indeed be stronger." Liang Yue then sat back on the sofa, crossed his legs, and said with a pretentious smile, "This is your wine? It seems that you are indeed not simple. Well, Mr. Liang Yue, I think our cooperation should be possible. In addition to the agreed $100 million, I will also give you another 3% of the profits. Of course, all this is on the premise that the method you said is true and effective." Tony Stark stood there with a solemn expression, looking at him as he spoke. "Then I wish us a happy cooperation, Mr. Stark." As he spoke, Liang Yue got up and clinked glasses with the other party, then smiled and drank with him. A pleasant party quickly came to an end. Aunt Liu drove him home and stayed overnight at his house, leaving only after breakfast the next morning. Therefore, Liang Yue rarely didn't enter the Stronghold world last night. Fortunately, Senior Sister Z, Arwen, Teacher Shizuka, Aunt Yuriko, and the others are now completely immersed in the fun of the dungeon. In addition, according to the original plan, this guy was originally going to retreat and cultivate alone. Therefore, the girls and the eagle on the other side didn't seem to have any reaction to his absence. Today is Monday. After seeing Aunt Liu off, there was still some time before school, so he wasn't in a hurry to go out for the time being. So he casually turned on the TV in the living room. The TV news was still playing old news from 3 days ago, that is, the night the abomination appeared out of nowhere, smashing and rampaging through the streets, causing a large number of casualties, and the army was powerless in front of him. Then, Liang Yue, a mysterious man dressed in a full set of armor and a red handkerchief around his face, appeared. In just a few encounters, he directly killed the opponent, and then beheaded the abomination. The situation that should have occurred in the plot, where he jumped down from a helicopter, transformed into the Hulk, and then fought the abomination for 800 rounds, with one green and one shit-colored big guy tearing down the entire street, did not appear. However, the impact of this matter is still very large. General Ross, as the main person in charge of this incident, held a press conference the next morning with a look of decadence and loss on his face. He took full responsibility for the failure of the military's entire super soldier program, and the result was naturally being suspended, investigated, and then shelved. However, although this matter caused a considerable impact, the final result was almost satisfactory to all parties. First of all, the military was at fault first, but Ross, the frontline person, has been dealt with, and the military will also bear the responsibility for all the losses in this incident. Therefore, the big things were successfully reduced to small things in the end. Even General Ross, who was temporarily shelved, was forgotten to the side under the deliberate neglect of the media. The media, on the other hand, took the opportunity to create a big news story, and the ratings of various TV stations have been soaring in recent days. Now, after 3 days of fermentation, the entire United States, the entire North America, and even the entire world have begun to be in an uproar because of the US military's super soldier experiment, with far-reaching influence. But the media and magazines of various companies are still tirelessly reporting on this news, just like the Iron Man incident some time ago. In Liang Yue's view, these media people can at least enjoy the taste on TV for more than half a month. The public's concern for this matter is even unprecedented. The internet has long been in an uproar, and it seems that everyone who can access the internet is actively expressing their opinions these days. Even in Liang Yue's class, they are hotly discussing this matter. Sam and Peter have even begun to regard Liang Yue as an idol in this incident. The only ones who are dissatisfied are probably those who had already died tragically at the hands of the abomination before Liang Yue took action. Those soldiers are actually okay. After all, it's their duty, belonging to the super soldier team under General Ross, which was originally a high-risk place, and it's not the first time they've died in order to capture the Hulk. The truly wronged ones are actually those unarmed ordinary people, who were just strolling on the bustling Brooklyn Avenue after sunset, and were happily beaten to death by the abomination, that supervillain in the end. Even if their relatives can get compensation from the military, those compensations are just some dollars. Those small pieces of paper called money, but the people are already gone, and the families behind them may fall into hardship because of this, and even directly disintegrate. Chapter 200: Being Targeted. Of course, in this incident, since the media is paying so much attention to Abomination, the villain and loser, there's no need to say more about Liang Yue, the positive figure. If this guy hadn't been somewhat rational before and knew to find a red silk cloth to cover his face, he could have taken the opportunity to release records and launch new albums. Given his current popularity, yesterday morning, Carlson came to find Liang Yue. For this matter, although he was wearing armor and a scarf at the time, those things might fool ordinary people, but for professional national institutions and intelligence departments, they were not reliable disguises. The incident happened at night, and S.H.I.E.L.D. came to the door the next morning, which is quite unreliable proof. However, after Carlson arrived, he didn't do anything to him, but had a very friendly conversation, implying that he wanted to win him over. The general process was that Carlson told him, "We have discovered that you are the mysterious person in armor and a red cloth last night. Then, you did a good job, being able to choose to stand up at a critical moment, fight against evil forces, protect peace and vulnerable groups, etc., praising him wildly. After that, the conversation took a turn. "But your combat ability is too dangerous, an uncontrollable force for the country. We need to register your existence." Of course, Liang Yue wasn't stupid, and directly denied it, saying that they had mistaken him, that he was just an ordinary high school student, and that he just happened to be going out for dinner and a date that night. Carlson said, "Who can prove it?" Liang Yue said, "Elizabeth." Needless to say, as the boyfriend publicly acknowledged by this blonde girl, she will naturally defend him and help Liang Yue keep the secret. He has this confidence. In addition, Elizabeth is a noble lady of the British royal family. She is not someone you can question at will. Even S.H.I.E.L.D. has to follow procedures. Therefore, pushing the problem to this woman is actually a very safe choice. This time, Carlson was helpless. As an old man in S.H.I.E.L.D., he naturally knew something about Elizabeth's family background. Under normal circumstances, they would definitely not take the initiative to provoke these real dignitaries. In fact, not to mention S.H.I.E.L.D., even Hydra, which has always been regarded as an evil organization, must also abide by this rule at this stage before the old order collapses. So, helplessly, Carlson had to skip this part temporarily, and then asked Liang Yue if he was interested in working for S.H.I.E.L.D. Liang Yue said no. His main task now is to go to school. Then Carlson said that he could choose to study at the S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy, where he could learn more professional knowledge, etc. Liang Yue declined, saying that he was here in the United States as an exchange student, and the academic status would not be easy to handle. Carlson directly stated that he could help him with immigration procedures directly, and as long as he was willing, S.H.I.E.L.D. would handle everything. Then Liang Yue, I am a dignified Chinese youth, would I care about your American sugar-coated bullets? Now, China's strategy of learning from the barbarians to control the barbarians is in full swing, and we are about to catch up with you. Why should I come to your country to be a third-class citizen? Of course, when answering, Liang Yue was actually very tactful, saying that he had no plans to immigrate. This time Carlson had nothing to say, and after staying at Liang Yue's house for a while to no avail, he had to get up and leave. However, after sending away this good old man from S.H.I.E.L.D., Liang Yue did not feel at ease because he knew that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s visit this time was just the beginning, or rather, a test, and they would definitely appear in his life more frequently in the future. In addition, to some extent, S.H.I.E.L.D. is still a relatively law-abiding department organization. After all, they are a formal national department, and some things are not easy to do too much. But since Carlson has found him, then Hydra, which is parasitic on the big tree of S.H.I.E.L.D., must also have understood his existence. Liang Yue is not sure if the other party will do anything to him, but he has to guard against it. It seems I have to find a bigger place to move as soon as possible. It's really a bit difficult to use my abilities while always staying in this bustling city area. Electromagnetic interference device, a product from a certain technological plane, which can detect and interfere with all electronic products within the coverage area. The effective range is 100 meters. The selling price is 500 points. After returning home at night, he entered the stronghold world and continued to retreat in that swamp, cultivating his hair control ability. After this period of hard work, although Liang Yue was often bitten by mosquitoes in the swamp, He was exhausted to deal with it, but the upgrade speed of his ability was very satisfying. In just 5 or 6 days of retreat, this guy's ability level has been strongly promoted to the 3rd level, hair manipulation ability level 310 level 3 and instinctive manipulation method from the genetic level. In principle, the stronger the mental power, the more powerful the ability can be exerted. Skill effect: flexibly control the length, curvature, and extension of hair characteristics, unlimited, as long as there is energy. It can be regenerated without limit. Toughness: the toughness is comparable to fishing line. Ability proficiency: 10,374 50,000. The toughness of a single hair is comparable to fishing line. It's hard to calculate a bunch of fishing lines in terms of length. I can probably extend my hair to about 5 meters, but the body hair can only be maintained at half a meter. This seems to have reached a limit now. This ability can finally be used. It can help in specific times. It can attack and defend, and at critical moments, it can also turn into a hairball to block an attack for me. However, under normal circumstances, it's not very useful. It seems that I have to work harder. I have to upgrade again. However, killing small flying insects such as mosquitoes and flies now has little effect, and the proficiency has dropped to 1 or 2 points. In addition, the idea of using hair as a needle cannot be realized for the time being. After all, there is still a big difference between fishing line and steel wire, so now, I should probably go back to the village and have a look. My current hair control is probably enough to deal with the mobs in the dungeon, right? Theoretically speaking, as long as I don't encounter goblins throwing fireballs, other monsters shouldn't be able to do anything to me. Speaking of which, can a cat demon's claws cut off fishing line? I'll go back to the village and try it right away. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.